new studio alert. You know, Chris, now that we've done it, I feel like the Will Blundell blunder his new studio. Just it has like the fucking Daily Bugle headline kind of thing. I could imagine J. Jonah Jameson yelling at someone saying that they need pictures of Jason Blundell. So, you know, there's that. But hey, welcome to Triangle Square, the PlayStation Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Beck, and alongside me, as always, is one Mr. Chris Figs. Chris, how you doing today?
Oh, just dandy. How are you, man?
Hanging on to the edge of life somehow, some way. But, you know, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about games, Chris.
Games.
And our inability to play games sometimes. And the crushing pressure of corporate America and adulthood. Wait a minute. I'm derailing. No.
Chris, is this a Kotaku review?
Yes, it is. I can't afford PS5, therefore PS5 bad. If you are new to the show, first and foremost, welcome. We hope you stick around and enjoy the show alongside us. We are going to be talking about Indiana Jones coming to PS5. Finally got a date on that. Some interesting side game coming from a big PlayStation franchise that a lot of people love, Housemarque, and how the Sony acquisition has helped them. A new studio coming in over at Sony First Party and more. But we are a show looking at the games industry through the lens of primarily being PlayStation fans. Chris and I play PlayStation more than anything else, though I like to say that we're pretty open to play whatever on whenever. It's just gotten significantly easier in the recent year to play almost everything that you really want to on PlayStation. So it's made it easier for us to not have to, I guess, prattle off to the sides of the other consoles that we do happen to have. But yeah, so we'll be talking about all this today, and if you love PlayStation and have a history with them, we think that you'll enjoy what we're going to talk about. But, Chris, let's get the show started in a time-honored way of checking in on what we have been playing. And I think it's best to kind of start this one on a really positive note on the fact that we've finally gotten Chris to see that Monster Hunter is the type of game that he enjoys. He just always came into it late and had the feeling that he was going to I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, Chris. I want you to lay out a little foundation. What do you think was different between why you thought you didn't like Monster Hunter and what's been making you like it this time around?
I don't know if I've ever said I don't like it.
Well, I think that's fair, but you've never clicked with it, I think is a fair way to talk.
It's more just been something I don't want to put the time into. And I'm having more fun with Wilds. Obviously, that's a game we both share this week, so we've been playing that. But I will say, it was like after the first day kind of went by where we didn't play, I kind of didn't think about it again until you messaged me and were like, "Hey, do you want to play Monster Hunter?" So it was like, I don't know. I think it's fun. Like, it's very flashy, which I like, at least in the combat, which is something that I think I gravitate towards, which we'll talk about on one of the other games on my list here. But yeah, I don't really know what it was. I think it was just like that first time I did that flippy flip trick with my with my daggers. I was like, that was sick as hell. I don't know how I did it, but that was cool. But I don't know. It's a good game. I think I'm less enthused by the actual hunting part. I like the fighting, but I don't necessarily like fighting and then it's like, oh, get on your chocobo or your hippogriff and go chase this monster into quicksand, and then nobody can find you for the rest of it. So then you almost lose all your rewards because they killed it before you were back, and now you have 10 seconds to pick up all your materials or you're going to fail, and it was a waste of time.
Yeah, you wouldn't fail. You just wouldn't get the materials, but
that's a failure.
Yeah, right. As much as it's cool that you have enjoyed the game and seem to be liking it when we are playing it together, you do highlight something that I think is still really surprisingly clunky about this game, and that is that it's like it does not really fully understand how to handle multiple players, which is crazy because literally since PSP, Monster Hunter has been about multiple players. But it's like this new format they're going with. It very clumsily tries to let people play together, but it doesn't always know how it wants to go about doing that. So for some reason, it wouldn't let Chris join me on a mission that he should have been able to join. And then a different mission that someone else joined me on, he couldn't join me, but I couldn't join him in the same mission for no real reason. And then one of the things I think is also weird is like you can do environment links so that you can run around in the same open world structure that this game has that the others haven't with a player, but the game won't let you do any quest while that's going on, which feels like it defeats the main purpose of that to begin with. It just, I don't know. It feels like this game is going for From Software Soulsborne style co-op, where you can only come in to help someone in the fight portion and then you bounce out. And it doesn't seem to fit the way that this game is actually structured. I think it works perfectly fine in a game like Worlds, which I don't think that you played, or at least didn't play much of.
Not enough to talk about.
So yeah, there's a few things, and continuing to speak about Wilds, I think it's a good time to say that I think Wilds is really good. I think it's fun. It looks great on the Pro. There's a lot of cool things that the addition of the open worlds added, but there's also a lot of things that I just don't really jive with. Like the game, at least in the campaign, will often just force you to get on the back of your sacred, your little birdie boy, and then you just don't have to play the game. Like the game will just have 5 minutes of running and bullshit talking that does not matter. And then you have to fight. And it's like, I kind of just wish it was a loading screen. Like, I'm not even kidding. I don't see what the benefit of riding around the back was, because it won't let you veer off path. It's like a forced segment. I don't know. It's been weird, because as much as I think this is cool and this is a neat addition, there's times where I'm like, I know that they couldn't just make Worlds again, but World kind of was better in these regards than this one. So, but either way, I'm glad to see you come in and enjoy it. But it's also just a different type of game. So, I mean, you finally getting a little deeper into it than I think you have. Just for the sake of clarification for anyone wondering, when you have tried playing in the past, the few times you have, did you ever make it out of the tutorial in any of the games? Or has that kind of just been like, you start playing them, you go through the tutorial, you never
I did a couple. I did a couple fights. I got not far in Worlds, but I played a good amount of World. Yeah, like it's not like I've never played Monster Hunter before. I just don't. Even with this one, like I like it, but like I don't care enough to put the time into it, and I still don't. Fair. Like, if you guys weren't playing it, I wouldn't play it. And you know that because when you messaged me, you were like, "Do you want to play it?" I was like, "I didn't even finish the tutorial." It's like I got in, I was like, "This is cool, this is fun," but I don't want to put the requisite time into it. I just don't care enough.
That's fair, but I'd say night one, you were like, you sold me this game the wrong way, which, I mean, that's a funny joke anyway, because we talked about this a lot. You were like, this is a fashion game, and you didn't tell me it was a fashion game, which is partially true. But I'd say that you were pretty high spirits on it. I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I had fun.
But at the same time, I think that the game is at its best when you're playing with other people, to be honest. And I think that's always been true of Monster Hunter. I think a lot of people like to solo play it, but
it's like something like I don't know that I would play it by myself to like platinum it or something like that. If like you guys like naturally as we played, we earned it, like cool. That means I've played that much of it, you know. But like that's not what I'm like interested in pursuing. So I mean that's like I don't know if that how much context that gives, but like that's kind of where I'm at. Where I'm like, yeah, I'll play it with you. I might do a couple things on my own, or like sometimes I will get a hankering to play it, but it's not like oh, I got to play this every day for me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's cool. Let's start with your flashy combat game, because I'm assuming it's Granblue Fantasy Relink, correct?
It is Granblue Fantasy Relink. Yeah, I don't know. It's really good. Well, I don't know if it's really good. I guess it's good.
It's really good. Well, no, it's not, but
it's something that like I could see myself not finishing because there's no like I'm not really invested in it at all. Like I'm not really invested in the story or the characters really. Like they're cool characters. They're all like they're cute and fun and all this kind of stuff for like you know, PG PG-13 at most JRPG, but the thing that appeals to me the most so far is like it's basically all boss battles. You run through like little environments and you collect shit and then you battle a boss, and that's like the story. I'm like in chapter 5, I'm doing a fight there. And the game doesn't seem particularly long either, so I don't know. I'm enjoying it because like when you're in the fights, it's very flashy. There's a lot of flashing lights. All the attacks are really cool.
Yeah.
It has like the special attacks where you can chain all of them up, and then everyone does their like special move back to back to back, and then if you do that, you get a bigger special move that's all of them together, and it does like a Power Rangers thing where all your characters are on screen, and it's like a full battle, and then they do this like big giant 4-person attack, and it doesn't do nearly as much damage as it feels like it should, but it looks cool.
But it's also extra, right? Like, it's hard to want to balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like it's like all the meters filling up at the same time. The AI not using theirs at random points, which is the one thing I found pretty cool. Where there's 3 AI controlled characters that I believe you can take control of at some in some way, but I don't find any reason to switch from the character I'm playing so far. But like they don't waste their like special moves on like crappy enemies, and it's something I don't experience that much in these types of games where like it seems like every time you're playing with an AI, like with Sheva or something like that, like, oh, she used 1 bullet, she's reloading, she got hit once, she's using a spray. And in this one I was fighting like a full set of like small enemies, like just ads basically, and they all saved their special, and which I thought was cool, because in boss fights like they'll use it. Like they'll use their special if I'm assuming the game like makes sure like, oh, you can chain if you do this all right, or if you choose to. But they don't waste that on just regular enemies, which I wasn't sure about at first. So that was a feature that I really found enjoyable. But
well, something that's interesting about a lot of JRPGs that I don't think they ever spend enough time telling people who are less familiar with them or haven't been playing them for 30 years is that a lot of JRPGs actually let you go in and control your like companion AI so that you can say, how aggressive do you want them to be? Do you want them to use items or mana or spells without your permission? Or do you always want to do it? Or do you want it to be balanced where sometimes they will, but most of the time they'll try and be conservative? But very few games tell you this. It's like they just want you to wait around in the menus and figure it out. And that's kind of unfortunate because Kingdom Hearts is kind of like that. People bitch about Donald and Goofy, or really specifically Donald all the time, but you can go in and make Donald closer to what you want him to do, and he will do it. It's just the game doesn't beat you over the head with it, which maybe it should if there's this many people that are like, he fucking sucks, he never heals me. So yeah, it's interesting, but sometimes it's where it's like, and this is true of From Software, which is a RPG in its own right? It's just kind of like, there's a lot of things that you can interact with that we just won't ever let you in on. But if you want to find out, you can, which there's like a mixed bag of that. Cause like sometimes I think you feel like you discovered this cool new layer, but then sometimes you're like, that would have made me fucking play this game completely different. Why couldn't you have told me that?
Yeah. I've definitely felt that. But I mean, in the end, like I recommend the game. It's cool. Like it gives you that me so far, that feeling of like, I'm kind of ready to be done with this so that I can just do that kind of thing. So
sure,
it's cool.
Yeah,
pulled me away from
well, a game I can quickly talk about on my side is I talked briefly about Immortals of Aveum last week, and going back through and playing it again on New Game Plus, I still just have to say that game's fucking cool. And more importantly than anything, that game's scope is what I feel like so much more AA and honestly even AAA games should be committed to being able to be. The game's like a nice 15, 16 hours. And I kind of miss games that have a big flashy, production value, but aren't so caught up in having to be 40, 50, 30 hours. It's kind of just nice to have a game that you play for 16 hours and you're like, that was cool. There's a lot going on and there was a cool story, but now it's gone. I'm done. I I've been playing so many games that have been taking me like weeks, if not months, to play, which is kind of against how it's normally been. But I was able to beat I was able to re-beat Immortals of Aveum 1.5 times in like a week and a half period, which is pretty good.
That's solid for you.
Yeah, so here lately, that's definitely solid for me. So I got the platinum finally. So not like it's helping much towards the trophy competition because I only lacked 2 trophies, but all the same.
That was just for you.
Now I've done it. Yeah, it was just for me. Cleaning up my my percentage rate there, if nothing else. Also, we talked last week about the power fantasy thing that games can sometimes give you, and playing that game on New Game Plus in order to rebeat it on Grand Magnus difficulty was kind of that. A lot of times it was just like, if I can aim this just right, I'll get a headshot. And since my stuff is so leveled up, I can kind of like one shot kill some stuff.
Nice.
And so you're just first person, just pow, pow, pow. Just kind of like, I feel like the shit right now. And sometimes that's all you want the game to make you feel. Sometimes you want the game to make you feel like a little bitch and you got to beat its ass. So you got to try and push back against it. But it's a delicate balance, Chris.
That seems like the perfect game for that, though, honestly. Like one playthrough of just, here's the story, here's the regular progression, and then another playthrough of, I am the most powerful wizard of all time.
Yeah. It probably feels like what people wanted. That you remember that Lichdom Battle Mage game that ended up running really poorly and not being what anybody really thought it was going to be, which arguably I think Immortals didn't do that great either. So either it wasn't what everyone wanted it to be, or just nobody else actually does want a 15-hour campaign in a AAA game. One of those two. But yeah, Immortals of Aveum feels like what I always wished that game was going to be. So that's cool.
Nice. There you go.
All right. So let's do Balatro real quick, because I know you're down. You got the blue deck down, which, if I'm not mistaken, means you have what, 2 or 3 decks left?
Oh no, dude! I have 5 more decks. I thought I was so much closer than I was, and then I was counting them yesterday, and I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, no, that's all I really have to say. I beat it with blue. One of my favorite combos, actually, which I was using. So I was using Vampire and Midas Mask, which Midas Mask makes all your face cards gold, and Vampire gives you plus 0.1 for every enchantment on a card that it takes away. So I had Midas Mask after Vampire, so it would fully eat it all, reproc the gold, and then I would start again and just keep building that way. It was interesting. I didn't expect to be able to beat it, but I was basically carried by that combo. But I got no planet cards, really. It was like a level 2 flush that I won with.
Oh, shit. That's wild. Also, for anyone who doesn't know much, when Chris says he beat, I'm assuming, and I feel like I know where this is going, you beat the gold stake or whatever, the highest stake on it, right?
Yeah.
What is that actually called?
Gold stake on blue deck.
Been a little bit since I've played, so worried it's rusty on the terminology. But
it's funny
so he's got like 4 or 5 more decks to do gold stake on. So
yeah, and then a lot more jokers to do gold stake on. I'm like half worried and half not, because I feel like Plasma deck and Anaglyph deck will make that just super easy. Like if I get one good run on Anaglyph and have like 15 jokers that are negative,
yeah,
that's the way I'm thinking about it. And then, fucking what's the one? Plasma deck is just easy. As long as you're balancing your chips, you're fine. So it's been a long road with Balatro. This was my first run in a while, actually. I was like kind of hadn't played it in a couple weeks. And then I'm like, oh, it's almost off my front page. Let's get that back up to the front. And then I just ended up putting like 2 or 3 hours in, winning a couple runs. So it was nice. I love that game, man. It's so good.
Nice. Well, then let's scooch over to MLB 25, because that was the game where you were kind of like, doesn't matter what else is coming out, MLB's coming out. That's where I'm putting my focus. So clearly I've been watching you have hours upon hours upon hours on. So this is a new year, new game. And I think you even kind of said like last year, you still put a lot of hours in, but in some ways you were kind of disappointed in last year's title.
Yeah.
So is that disappointment kind of carrying over, but still carries it's MLB the show, it's still good even when disappointing? Yeah. Or do you have that kind of revolution that you were hoping for?
the thing with last year's like online, because I play MLB for like the multiplayer, like so
Sure.
I'm a big Diamond Dynasty, like buy your packs, all this kind of stuff, like build the best team. And last year it was a little rough because the best cards are stuff that you have to grind for. And they didn't make those cards like, I don't know how you would say it, but they like they could be used in any set, right? So you got to a point where they would switch seasons, which means the cards that you had just spent an entire season working on were no longer valid. So it was one of those things where after the first reset like that, I was like, I'm not putting the time into, grind events or, fight for wins just to not be able to use them and start over. It was one of those things where they wanted to give you more like 99s. So they wanted to give you the best of the best, more often. But in doing that, they made the grind feel terrible because there was
Like
literally
the payoff is not high enough.
yeah, there is no payoff because there were some of the best cards come out at the end of the season. So you're going through this thing trying to earn the best cards you can, and then turns out that you can't use this card because the season ends tomorrow and you finally unlocked it on the last day of the season so that you can't use it. And it's just like this sucks. So they took that out, which is cool. So like now if I wanted to, I could parallel 5 cards and use them the whole season. But
Nice.
like the way that it's going now, I like better because it's, I don't have any 99s on my team, right? Like I don't have any of those giant players, but it's more of a like, okay, like, oh, my high-end Roman Anthony card is out of my lineup because I've gotten a better card, but it doesn't feel like I was forced to not use a card for an arbitrary reason. It was just like, here, you can use them all, but you're eventually going to earn cards that take the cards that you've earned out of your spot, so
which feels like a
helped.
more natural progression for that type of game in particular. Yeah,
it's kind of it was basically like, every 3 months it was like Batman waking up like, oh, it's the new game, so I've forgotten how to punch. It was just that it didn't make sense. So I'm glad that they went away with that.
Nice.
I've been playing a little bit more of the offline modes. That's kind of the thing with me is like I only play the offline modes when I'm going for the platinum. And this one has like a trophy that I'm not sure how to get. So I've basically just been like going through franchise mode, which is just you build a team and you make all the decisions. Because one of the trophies is get a player to the Hall of Fame in franchise or road to the show. And I'm not playing 1,600 games to get through a 10-year MLB career and road to the show. So I've been trying to do it in franchise, and my team didn't sign me with a new contract. So now I'm like, what happens now? I'm in like year 2046. So I'm like 21 years into this franchise. So it's been interesting. But overall, I think it's a good game. There, people online have some issues with it competitively, but I think it's fine. So
I have a question for you because you're kind of a little bit more into sports games. Like, the only sports games I have platinums in are a couple of FIFA games. It's not a lot. And I think that most of the FIFA games feel, I don't know. I have such a limited, I don't want to speak too matter of factly. So instead, I'll say for me, it often feels like the trophy requirements in a lot of sports games feel kind of brutal. Where it's like they don't really want most players to get it, which it seems surprising to me. And I know that naturally speaking, most players don't go for trophies or for platinums anyway. Most players like trophies to some degree, but I don't think that a significantly smaller portion care specifically about the platinum. But it always feels to me like MLB 25 is kind of, or MLB the show rather, is structured towards being a relatively like, as long as you like this type of game and you're going to play for 30, 40, 50 hours, you'll probably end up with a plat. Do you like that design better? Or do you actually think that there's some merit to games like, FC 25 having like a, 80 to 100 hour platinum with a kind of 5 out of 10 difficulty if you look at some of the different things?
I don't know. it's I don't mind. I think it's nicer that it's easier, but because it lets people if you're looking at the trophies at all, like you're exploring the modes to like do this kind of stuff. You know, they've had stuff like some rough requirements. Like I think in 20 you had to basically hit level 100 and get to the next tier of stuff. So like that was, I remember just grinding that, and I wasn't as into the online back then, so I was just grinding online that I didn't enjoy as much because I'm trying to get this trophy, you know. So
Yeah, sure.
again, it depends on what you go for, because like my brother plays just as much MLB as I do, but he plays entirely offline, you know,
Yeah.
and he has the possibility to get the platinum if he wants. And I think that's a better setup than like, I think there was one sports game, I think it was a 2K game where you had to be like top 5 in the world. And it's like that's just not
insane. Like, what kind of trophy is that? Well, one of the things, and I don't know, so this is me speaking only about this game. One of the reasons I don't go for FIFA platinums is because most of them have had online requirements, and I think to a strong degree. And I'm always kind of like, it's a sports game. Why put it that much stuff? Like, you know, have it be like a trophy for play a match online or win a match online, sure. But when it's like similar to something like that, where it's like, well, you have to have this many hours or this many wins, or I don't know. I guess it's, to me, I don't view it in the same light, but I'm also not nearly as into sports. So I think maybe other people might be like, well, yeah, it's competitive. The point is to play with other people.
Well, that's kind of where I was going, where I guess like it depends on what you want the you know, what is the goal that the developer is going for with the platinum, because like,
yeah,
to me, like in a lot of ways, like that, if I was a developer, I think it would be cool putting out a game knowing that like only the best of the best can get this platinum. Like that,
true.
There is a level of like, that's cool. You know, like you look at someone like, not even in sports games, but like Killzone 2, where they had that trophy where you had to be at the top 10% of one leaderboard, you know, at reset or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, obviously that stuff gets easier as, you know, time goes on and the game kind of dies out. But like someone who had a Killzone 2 platinum right at the beginning, like that was a good Killzone 2 player, you know. And
sure.
I think there's a level of merit to like, we're a multiplayer game. If you have the platinum, you're one of the best players of our game. And I think there's a argument that that's almost cooler than, well, you got to try all the modes, but so here you go. You know?
Yeah, that's true. But that's funny, because that's what the other thing is. I think sometimes for any given game, right, it's like, what do we want the trophy list to inspire the player to do? And I think for a lot of people, trophies are just a way to try and push people towards experiencing more of the game that you spent so much time going into, which I get. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, I like that better than, say, for my own preferences, something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, where the game itself was designed with this level gate system, and the level gating would push so far after every story mission, basically to push you into doing a bunch of side content, so that they were like, we made all this side content, we need to make a way to make people want to play it. But I'm a much bigger fan of, the game should basically require you to do some side content to keep with the level gate, but to do it all or a majority should just be something that something else in the game outside of just beating it goes towards. But that's just my preference. Part of the reason I got out of Odyssey is I felt like every time that the story would get interesting, I'd get gated pretty strongly by a level gate for the next story mission, and I'd have to go do like 3 or 4 hours of side missions, and I just didn't think they were that good. Some people do. We're just different people. And so in that sense, I get both, but I guess I prefer it when the trophies are just kind of play a reasonable amount of all the types of content that the game has to offer, and we'll reward you for it. But, you know,
well, yeah,
it's different people want different things.
I think in that
including
sense,
the developers.
I don't know. The Odyssey, because I think in that sense, like I agree with you, but I do think like if your design philosophy is like, Cassandra did all of this shit, and you're Cassandra, so you have to do all of this shit to see the story. Like, I get that. I think the problem with Odyssey specifically is that game is way too long. But like, I would also argue that something like Kingdom Come Deliverance, like that seems like a game where it's completely appropriate that you would have to do all of the side content, you know.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the game, but I think generally touching in on what you're saying is there are scenarios where the setup, the character, whatever it be, makes more sense to push you to be like, well, you have to do all of these things in order to get there. So yeah, I think that's part of it too, right? It's like in any given thing, the amount of time that it requires to get something often will be the deciding factor. There's just something cool about trophies being that way, because as long as you're not literally obsessive about trophies, it's just something you can do if you want to. Whereas I always felt like Odyssey was basically forcing my hand, and there was like maybe 2 side quests that I thought were even memorable in the probably 20 hours I played of that game. And then you look at something like Valhalla that just stretches it so much further. And I have a friend that was like, "Oh yeah, I'm like 180 hours into Valhalla." I'm like, "What the fuck do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, I haven't beat it yet."
That's crazy.
What?
I've thought about going to Valhalla too. I have it downloaded again, but
that's wild.
I don't know. I want to play Shadows it's a little bit.
For me, Shadows is more on the list because it seems to be about a game that takes about 40 hours to do everything. That's more up my alley.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I might play Atomfall next. I'm hearing a lot of Fallout comparisons, which
Atomfall looks cool.
That sells me.
Well, let's go, John. I'm going to quickly talk about Nine Souls. I've been kind of in this little, I guess, funk where I'm not quite sure what to play. It's like I'll finish something and then I just feel like I struggle really hard to figure out the next thing I want to do. And so I was kind of bouncing around, spending days and like literally like an hour going through the store and just looking at things that were on PS Plus and things that had a low barrier of entry, games that I had and you had. And I finally was just like, you know what? Nine Souls was in a video I was watching of someone talking about the color teal in a bunch of Japanese games and what it represents of a certain philosophy type, and that it's in games like all of the Team Eco games. And then it's also in Nine Souls. And I thought Nine Souls looked interesting. So I decided to hop in. And I don't know, part of me really likes aspects of it, and then part of me just finds it very frustrating. And I'm normally not, I wouldn't say, it could just be that I'm bad at the game at this particular point, but I'm at a spot where I feel like the game is telling me I'm not supposed to go this way, but it's not clear to me that there's any other way to go. And couple that with the fact that the game's progression system is very different, despite the fact that it appears a lot like a Souls-like Metroidvania, like a Hollow Knight style game. The way that you actually get skill points, at least as far as I can tell, is to find these little lotus things that are like shaking, and you need to break into them and like do this little mission, like a little micro series of events that teaches you a new mechanic, and then you get a skill point that you can put towards something. So one of the weird things is there's not really a way to like farm to make yourself stronger. So when I'm trying to go through this area and I keep getting this enemy that like no matter how perfectly I feel like I play, I eventually just get overcome. It feels like the game's trying to tell me I'm not supposed to go this way, but it's also designed in a way where each section is supposed to open consecutively to the other. So there's not like another way I can go. So I don't know if it's like a mixture of I haven't been having the best week, so I'm not necessarily in a mood to put up with the annoyance of trying to figure out what's going on and why I can't go. But I haven't deleted the game. Part of me still wants to return to it. But since it pulled me out of it, I was just kind of like, I got to figure out something else to play, which we'll talk about shortly. But the last game you have on your list, Chris, is kind of an interesting one. And I'm assuming that you're playing on like Steam Deck or something. So what's up with Pokemon Glazed Edition?
Yeah, so no, I'm actually playing it on my phone. There's like a
oh, nice.
You can play like ROMs and shit now just through the App Store, which is crazy.
Yeah, I saw that they have like emulators are part of the App Store finally.
Yeah. So on that, I've been playing Pokemon Glazed, and it's it's in a new region, and then it has Kanto and Johto in it. And it has all the Pokemon from Gen 1 through 6.
Nice.
Yeah, put in there.
Is it a ROM hack based off of a specific game as far as you can tell? Like,
I think it's based off Emerald. That's what it looks like. Maybe, yeah, it has to be Emerald or Fire Red because it's not a dual screen game.
If it's got Johto and Kanto, did you say it's both of those?
Yeah.
It's probably Fire Red, Leaf Green because both of those are already in those games.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could just build your new region on top of that, yeah.
Yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it. It's kind of nice. Like I've said a couple times that I've been trying to find like a Pokemon game to play because I kind of miss that era. And this one has kind of hit me pretty well because it's one I've just never played.
Nice. Is there a normally I feel like the ROM hacks have like a kind of a shtick to them that's like something unique to them. Is there like a main differentiating factor here, or is it just new region, new custom Pokemon?
I don't think there's any custom Pokemon. It's just a new region and a new story. And I think it takes place after Platinum. But like it does stuff where like mega evolutions are in it and all of this kind of stuff. So like sick. What it really does is
mega evolutions in sprite form.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So it basically makes, it brings the new game mechanics into 2D and into that, the way I prefer the games, right? Like of Emerald and that era.
Sure.
But yeah, so far, like I said, it's cool. It's like it's a new protagonist. You're playing as like this blonde guy with Goku hair, running around. They've made modifications to the Pokemon. So like, I've been rolling people with a Shroomish, which is just not normally a good Pokemon, at least not in my experience. So yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it. It's a cool thing. I lost a bunch of my time actually the other day because like the emulator is weird where like sometimes like I've opened the emulator like 2 or 3 days later and my progress is still exactly where it was. And I opened it today and it had shut the game off and restarted it. So I hadn't saved and I lost like 4 hours of time.
Damn.
But it was one of those things that says I do like it where I wasn't immediately like I'm never playing this again, so
yeah, that's like a good proof of like, okay, I do like this.
So I'll get back to it. So it's cool.
It's funny. Speaking of that in particular, that's kind of I think part of where my annoyance from Nine Souls go is that Nine Souls is a game Chris bought, so I downloaded it, and for the first time ever, for whatever reason, I guess it's because I downloaded it at lunch and I wasn't paying attention. I did not switch accounts back over to mine, so I sunk an hour and a half or something total into Chris's account before I realized that I was not on my account.
Did you have to start a new game? Because I have a file. It's not far.
Well, yeah, but I didn't cloud download it.
Oh, you got it.
So part of the reason I even knew is that my wife has been playing The Sims 4 and she's been switching to her account. And whenever she's done, she switches back over to mine. So she had played, and then I come home and I go to hop on Nine Souls and it says I don't have a save. And I was like, what? And so I was like, oh, wait. And I logged on to yours and I saw it and I was like, oh, look at the date, look at the time. Yep, that's mine. And so I deleted it so that it wouldn't try and overwrite yours in the cloud just in case. And then I had to restart. And I'm further now than I was when that happened. But I don't think that helped either. There's like a mild annoyance that comes from something like that.
I mean, Nine Souls in my experience was very much like a Sekiro like type of game. So if you're not into,
it really wants you to parry.
You're not going to be into it. I can see that. You got to take my recommendations. Go with Crow Country. Go with Signalis. You get those small bite-sized experiences. That's what you need to do.
I still have Signalis downloaded. I realized that yesterday. So it's not a no. It's just I don't know exactly what I want to play. And so I'm trying not to... I'm trying not to jump into Signalis and it not be the thing for me and then me push it into this list of maybe never trying it again. That's the hard thing with any game is like, if you're not in the mood for a game, but you're trying to just like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, sometimes that can lead you away from games you would like in different scenario,
Yeah. I was trying to use my PlayStation Stars points because I have like almost 7,000. And I was trying to get Shadow of the Damned, the remake, because it's in there. And I can't get it to let me redeem the coins for some reason. So I didn't do it. But I was like, this might be one that you'd want to play. But maybe once I can get those coins going.
And the only reason I didn't is because I want to look and see if the reviews have gotten better, because technically speaking, it was really rough. I know I liked the game, or at least I liked the game in the past, but it it being a remaster and being arguably worse technically than it was in the original is kind of fucking brutal. Like, starts to feel like why. So I am curious. I want to look at it again and see if they fix some of the things that were going on with it. So because that game feels like something that I'd be down for right now. Like it's not super long. It's a very specific type of game. I almost went Resident Evil 4 remake finally too.
Oh, that would have been
that was kind of a maybe. Instead, because I'm in this is my last game I'll talk about as well. Because I'm in this mood of not knowing what to play, and a while back I had downloaded Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered because, as I mentioned, I'm trying to play more DLC this year. So my plan was to play Zero Dawn Remastered and try it again, and then finally play Frozen Wilds. And so I started it, and I was worried that I would do like 2020 when they made the Horizon for PS4 run at 60 frames per second. On PS4 or on PS5 rather. I thought I would fall out of it again, kind of like I did there. But I think the extra 4 years have kind of made this game feel a little further out from me. And I'm finding myself enjoying it more. There's definitely some dated things about it, even with the remaster. And I think the thing that's a little disappointing about it, as much as it looks great and runs really well for the most part, I've had a lot of glitches, like visual glitches. Things will just disappear directly in front of me, but not the entirety. So like there'll be a statue with foliage on it and the statue will disappear, but the foliage will stay. And then I'll walk close enough and eventually it'll just spring back into existence. And earlier I was doing a side trail and you could see the yellow ropes tied around something that was invisible. And as soon as I jumped on the yellow rope, it just smacked the wooden poles back into place. And I was just like, what the fuck is happening? There's been parts where Aloy's supposed to be talking and her lips don't move at all. Very few and far between. But I'm just like, wow, this is kind of sloppy for what felt like it was supposed to be a big PS5 Pro early title. And so, yeah, I've been a little interested to see that. I still think the game is pretty good. Honestly, I do enjoy Horizon. I still think that Sony pushed a little too much Horizon in a short period of time. And it's, I don't know how to describe it, but I do enjoy it. And I think that it'd be good for them to let the franchise have moments of rest. And I kind of hope that we're naturally on that, but it's hard to say because it does still seem like the Horizon. Did the Horizon MMO get hit? Did it get canceled?
No,
or was it just the multiplayer game?
I can check, but I think it was just the multiplayer game.
Yeah. So, and I'm not worried about the MMO, so I don't have to care about that. Like, if it's an MMO specifically, I'm not going to play it anyway.
The MMO.
So the multiplayer game is still
the
active.
Multiplayer game is still
and that's
going.
A Monster Hunter style game. And I'll tell you, there's something there. And I think it's crazy they waited this long to even do that. But this goes to show, I might play that because there are parts of this game where I'm like, the hunting is fun in this. Like, fighting combat-wise is fun. And I can imagine having a group of people doing it. But now you're also competing with Monster Hunter Wilds, depending on when you release. So, will you or want you? But, yeah, Chris, I often wonder what you returning to Horizon might look like if you ever do. I have a strong feeling that it's still just not the game for you.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
I have found myself enjoying it more than I thought I would going back to the remastered. And I think like I've said, there's certain aspects to the way that they handled combat limitations in the first game where they're actually less limited than they are in the second game that I kind of prefer. I did my first cauldron today, and I kind of remembered some of the fun ways that you can go about handling cauldrons that only exist because the game will let you have arguably an unlimited number of trip caster lines and trap set, which is cool. The sequel won't let you. And I always thought that was just weird. It's like, so the next generation console with way more CPU and stuff says I can't? Why? And I think the answer is to try and push you towards the new Melee and everything,
I'd be way more likely to play Forbidden West than Zero Dawn for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. What really got me though is in replaying this, I am reminded how much that I think Zero Dawn, or rather that I think Days Gone, feels like a Horizon style combat, but in a more modern way, because it's like luring things into traps that you've set to expose and trip. And I don't know, I just get a vibe between the two of them that's connected. And playing this kind of has me incredibly excited to play Days Gone whenever it comes back out. So that's pretty neat. I'm enjoying the hell out of that. And
Brutal news about the Platinum Trophy for Days Gone. Absolutely brutal news.
And it is an auto pop, right?
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, Horizon Zero Dawn is not an auto pop. And actually, if you import your save and continue on, you won't even be able to get certain trophies.
Really?
Without restarting the game under a new save, because some of them are like trophies for specific triggers of like, hey, you have to do this thing, and you can't because it can't be the first time. You can't liberate your first camp on a save where you've liberated a camp already.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about it that way.
And so I'm assuming the way that the game is actually set is that it looks at how many camps have you done, and once it goes from 0 to 1, that's when it pops the trophy. Basically, as long as this value is more than 0, or the first time it becomes more than 0, pop the trophy. So it's weird for sure. I don't know how they worked around to it, but I thought that was interesting. So we'll see. I'm excited, and I have a question for you, kind of on the basis of that. We've talked a lot about how Xbox has got things coming, and we talked about when we'll see day and date on, or how often we'll see day and date for Xbox games on PlayStation as well. And I think you've seen it as well. A lot of people online have always kind of had this. There will come a time when PlayStation's day and date on PC as well. And after a lot of thought for various different reasons, I don't think that that's ever going to be the case, because Sony leaning so heavily on remasters this generation to fill out the times and where their first party don't have any games coming out. I think that they view the potential to port to PC at a later time as one of those things. Hey, we have a slow schedule. We don't have anything coming out, nothing to really pop and get us sales internally, but we can get Saros working on PC a year after the original version, and that could be our product that we can have on the market. And we can get Days Gone going here on this. So I think that they view it as staggered gives them something they can always go back to go, we have a slow period and we need to make some money. What's an easy way? Remaster this, throw it over here. Port this to PC, throw it over there. Yeah. I don't think that they would do the same thing of, let's spend more money up front to have it day and date on PC when you could just spend that money down the line with another developer who can do the porting work for cheaper than you could pay your people to co-develop for PC day one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just, I don't know. I think part of the sales pitch of the console has to be you play these here first and best. That's why, Xbox is out of the game, because they stopped doing that. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't have to. I would never say never to that.
Well, I think as long as the game has a reason. So as we've long said, if it's a multiplayer game where you need a player base,
it's day one. Day and date. I don't know. Like, could Fizzant be a day and date PC game? I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be either, but that's just because of the nature of the game. But your point stands.
Yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima 2 being day and date feels like a never, if I'm being honest.
Well, it's, and not to talk about Xbox, but I think it illustrates the point, right? It's a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is a good thing for Xbox. And it's like, yeah, but it's not a good thing for the console because there's no reason to buy the console.
It's a good thing for Microsoft's ability to make money off of games.
Yeah. If you're rooting for the billionaires, then it's a good thing for Microsoft. But if you're rooting for the plastic box, then sure, it's not a good thing. If you're just playing games, then it doesn't matter to you. So I think that's just kind of the way with this. It's the same thing with this, where you wouldn't want to go, because once you go day and date, it's very hard to find a reason to say not to buy a PS5 over a PC, or Hell, over a Steam Deck, where a lot of these Forbidden West runs on Steam Deck, as does Spider-Man. So like,
or hell, depending on did you see the Xbox image leak that was like a UI for their future system that had a Steam button on
yeah,
it, and then they edited the picture out and swapped it with one that doesn't show that.
yeah.
And that's long been said, but
I think they
we've
do
had
that
no
shit on
real.
purpose.
I think they do too.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is it does show that they are planning for their next console to have an integrated Steam. But I'm always like, I'm super curious. Does that mean that you'll be able to open Steam on this next console and buy the game? And if so, why? What do they even benefit from that?
See, that's why I think people are reading that image wrong, unless I'm reading the image wrong. But the image that what I'm seeing is not an inherent, holy shit, Steam's on Xbox. I think people had that rumor in their head, saw this and went, holy shit, Steam's on Xbox. But what I would guess this is going to end up being is I personally own my copy of Master Chief Collection through Steam, and I'll be able to not have to repurchase that or have to have a Game Pass subscription to use that copy of Halo Master Chief Collection. Or if you did the same thing with Avowed. But like, I can't believe people have immediately jumped to this thing that says Steam means, I've got, I can buy Days Gone on Steam and play it on my Xbox. I think people who think that are putting the cart way above the horse or way before the horse just because they've heard that rumor, where it seems way more likely at this juncture that they would just be integrating the Microsoft games into the console, even if you've bought them on Steam. It just fits with the Play Anywhere thing, right?
I think I agree with that for the most part. And I think it kind of goes... Because I'm waiting to see where the monetary benefit for Microsoft is here, clearly letting you buy games from Steam on their console and making it that easy is great for the consumer, bad for Microsoft in terms of their ability to get the most money, because they're not going to get any kind of split on that. If this is essentially just a PC, Microsoft does not get a share of every Steam game sold on PC. That's not how it functions. So my thought was maybe they'll set it up. Well, go ahead. What's your question?
I guess I'm curious, like, if you would consider this if this is a Microsoft branded Xbox PC, do you consider that a PC or do you consider that an Xbox?
I think it's going to depend a lot on how they go about branding it. And it's also going to depend a lot on how open it truly is. If it really is something that you can open up and do Steam on, then it's a PC. If it's a console that Steam can be loaded as a secondary launcher of some sort, I think you might be able to obfuscate calling it a PC a little bit, but it's a PC it's going to be more of a PC than consoles, but in a similar way to the way consoles are PCs right now, and that consoles are essentially just PC architecture, but in a lockdown box with one set of specs.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm asking is I'm curious, like, if you could, through Steam, play God of War on this machine,
sure.
Does that mean God of War is on an Xbox, or does that mean God of War is on PC? You know what I'm saying?
I guess I'm curious
on how it would work.
It's both, but I think it is a way around. I mean, you could argue right now that you can play God of War with an Xbox controller on PC and use the Xbox game overlay, and in many ways, you're playing God of War on an Xbox. They already say a PC is an Xbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
this is an Xbox.
But going back to the Steam thing, I am kind of what you said makes me curious, because I feel like what they might be doing, but I'm not sure how they would go about locking this down, is allowing you to play your pre-existing Steam library on this console so that they can persuade people to move over to this box who have not traditionally been on Xbox, but not allowing you to open Steam and buy the games through the interface. Rather, you can just download Steam, download the games you've already purchased, and then basically make it to where you can still buy games through Steam and run them on there, but you've got to go out of your way to go on an app or a computer and do it. And that they'll still make it to where the easiest way to buy games on the console is to open the Microsoft Store, download the game. But I could also see it being like what you're talking about. Hey, Steam is here because all we're going to do is honor licenses for Steam versions of Microsoft games so that you can play anywhere on this without having to buy the game again on the Microsoft Store, you know. But
Yeah.
the only thing I'll say there is that if you know that those licenses already exist, it seems like it'd be easier just to back end convert those licenses into a generic license that can run on Microsoft Store or Steam. And you would solve the problem without even having to make Steam have to be on your device. So I don't know. This is clearly, I'll give Microsoft this. This is breaking a lot of norms. It's just a matter of to what degree and how far are they really going to take it.
It's just interesting to me because I'm looking at the picture right now, right? And it's just your library. And yes, that doesn't mean inherently that it couldn't also include your Steam library. But like you get a copy of Xbox games on PC, right? I'm not making that up. If you buy it on Xbox, you get a PC copy. You can play it there.
Yeah, you do. You do through the Microsoft Store. Yeah.
So again, to me, it just seems like we've worked with Steam. If you've bought Avowed on PC and you buy an Xbox, you have it. And all it's showing you is you've bought this on Steam and you've bought this here. I wouldn't be surprised if this launched and had GOG and Epic Game Store, assuming the games are on those platforms too. Sure. Because it looks, the images of your library, you know? And I'll tell you what, it wouldn't surprise me if when this launches, there's a Sony tab and, oh, you bought Sea of Thieves on PlayStation, you get an Xbox code. You already have to integrate your account, you know? So what will be more interesting is if it's in reverse, right? You bought Indiana Jones on Xbox, you get it on PlayStation. That would be fascinating.
Yeah, that's not going to happen because then Sony would just be like, we don't care. We don't even want the game. Just take it. Yeah. And that's that goes to like how far do you want to push that, you know? So it'll be interesting to see. But Chris, let's go over to a question real quick. We've got a listener and a patron, newest patron, RMG0731, says, what do you do when you beat a game and the next game is new and a few days away still? He's waiting on first Berserker and not starting anything, just grinding MLB 3v3 at this point.
My man.
So this feels like a good thing to throw at you because I think that your answer might be grind MLB.
Yeah, I was going to say grind 3v3 MLB. Honestly, though, like it's weird because like I think there hasn't really been recently. I think the next game that's going to be like I'm not going to start anything is like Clair Obscur, and I feel like I haven't had one of those since Callisto Protocol, where I was like, I'm dropping everything to play this. You know, I just
Clair Obscur goes a lot better than Callisto did for you.
Oh my god, seriously!
I know both of us beat Callisto, and
we both got that
you
platinum.
Fucking platinum it?
I did, yeah.
You madman! Absolute madman. But yeah, I mean, someone the other day was like, "Hey, I'm liking Callisto." I'm like, I don't think Callisto is awful. It just doesn't live up to any of the expectations that I think people had for it.
I think it's pretty.
That's
awful.
All. I don't think it's. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think there are awful design decisions in a game that's mostly just mediocre in the true sense of the word. It's fine. It looks good. The game is very pretty.
The Uber Eats driver is a terrorist. What the fuck, man? What a terrible fucking story. Yeah, so I guess the point I was trying to make is that like there hasn't been a lot of games where I've been like, I cannot start something because like we've talked about on the show, everybody knows like I'll happily drop something. So like
so it's not much for you to just be like, oh, MLB came out, fuck this game.
Yeah.
I was enjoying it too, but fuck this game.
The closest I came was being like, I'm not playing Monster Hunter. And then like I downloaded it just kind of to see. And then I played some Monster Hunter. But like that was the closest I've been to like, oh, I have to like prepare. It was the opposite of I'm preparing you to not ask me to play Monster Hunter.
Yeah, that one was funny because I was playing Monster Hunter, and so I finally started, and like 2 hours into me starting it, Chris just sends me a fucking screenshot of the most deranged looking Joker, Hunter, and Pikachu Palico. And I was like, this motherfucker. And then the next day, I'm like, so did you start? He's like, no, I didn't even get out of the tutorial.
I did spend like a lot of time in that. the designs I got were like I found them online, but like I spent a lot of time like making my own character, and then I'm like, I wonder what people did with this, and then I'm like, this would be funny. So I just completely. I was originally playing like as this extremely hot woman, as I normally am, as I'm wont to do in these games, and no, I went with the Joker because it's way funnier. That a very close to Heath Ledger's Joker is just running around our world killing monsters.
Was it Dragon's Dogma 2 that I'm thinking of where people were making Kanye?
Yeah. Yep.
And it like looked just like
him. Yeah. Yeah, I would play Dragon's Dogma that way.
Another Capcom game, They really like their character creators.
That RE engine, man. What an engine. That and Decima. Some of the most beautiful engines I've seen.
Yeah, you know what? That actually, I guess I'll answer the question real quick and then pull us into another question there. I think it depends on the type of player you are. So to Chris's point, it's so hard for him to even get to that point because he's just going to drop whatever if the need is there and the want's there. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that I've been struggling because I feel like I'm not playing games day and date as often as I did. Just nature of life and expectations, things that are going on. But of course, there are certain games I want to try and be as close to day and date as I can. So I sympathize and really empathize with the feeling because usually for me, you know how I am. If I get to playing a game, usually that's what I'm playing and until I'm done. So I have to think if I am going to start anything in these few days, sometimes the answer is don't take a break from gaming and let your return after a few days break be this game you've been so hyped for. That's honestly probably more often than not the right thing to do, but we just don't because gaming is your hobby. So for me, I try to look at smaller indie games, puzzle games, AA games, whatever it be that I know are shorter that I feel like I could squeeze into those days. And that's a good way to try and vary the types of games you're playing, the length of game you're playing. And I think that also helps whenever you're about to go into a game that you know is going to be 40, 50, maybe 80 or 100 hours. It's a good way to kind of offset that. Get you a quick, like, hey, here's a puzzle game that takes 3 hours to beat, but it's really cool. Sweet. That sounds good. I want to do that. Here's a horror game that takes 2.5 hours. Cool. Let's do that. What are the air quotes for, Chris?
You're the king of the 2-hour horror game that Chris has been recommending for 3 years now. Like, fuck it. It's a 2-hour game.
I know Signalis is more than 2 hours because I've played at least 2 hours of it.
I didn't, so.
Yeah, but also knowing you probably followed a guide.
No, of course not. Why would I do
that? Yeah, now we have the answer for Chris right there. So, yeah, just because we were talking about character creation, and I don't know where else to slot this one in, so screw it. Let's go for now. Jehudi MD, another long-time listener, long-time patron, says, when the option of naming the main character comes up in a game, what do you usually go for? Now, Chris, I know that you went for the meme here, but what do you normally do? Is it the meme, or do you have like a go-to set of names you rotate between, or what?
No, I usually just make up something, or recently, like I've been playing, if I play something like I use the name that I use in my writing for like most of it. So like I play a lot of like Alara in my stories or in my games. Like that's what I name most of my female characters, and I play female characters most of the time. So there you go. That's usually the name.
Nice. One of my go-tos is Raziel from Soul Reaver. I just love that name. I think it's a really cool one. So often you'll see, if you ever played an online game with me that lets you name your character, that's what my guy's name is. But as a way to shake it up, it depends on the character creator, right? For something like Baldur's Gate, where I'm like, okay, I'm actually going in because this is a role-playing game. The idea is I'm basing my character off of something, and he's going to follow this. So I will go through and name in what I feel like fits the character backstory that I've come up with. And I know that's kind of vague sounding, but sometimes the way I'll do it, because I still want it to be original, but I don't want to sit there and struggle to come up with a name. This is also true of the cards in our game, Chris. Sometimes the way that I approach naming characters that I've got the design idea for, but I don't have a name automatically for, is to take a name of a character that I already like and then anagram it and add a vowel somewhere if I need to make it make sense.
Yeah.
So one of the cards that I came up with for a paladin card in our card game, I was like, I don't really know what to call this dude. And so I was like, I could call him Raziel because that's what I always do. And I was like, it doesn't match the color identity I'm giving to this character. And then I thought, well, let's just anagram it, flip it around, and then see what comes up. And it gave me Zariel. And I thought, that sounds pretty cool, but I'm just going to put an A in front of it in Azariel. I was like, that works. And then keep going. So I do that every now and then for characters that I'm coming up with. It's like, let's come up with a name either by some way of something that I recognize, and we'll go off of there.
Yeah, I do that a lot too, where like I have someone I name.
To be fair, that comes from Kingdom Hearts. This is literally just me doing the Organization 13, take your name, scramble it up, and smack an X in there. It's the same energy, but a little less evil.
Same energy, yeah. No, sometimes I'll like look at cans and just like pick words off the can and like move it around or change it. One of the like main races in my story is just Balatro with a K. That I still got to change because it's too on the nose, but I kind of like it. It like rolls off the tongue pretty well.
You're looking at your Red Bull over there and you're like, ginseng. That sounds pretty cool. How could I use that?
Yeah. I've done that. I had, so I used to have someone like I used highlighter and I took a bunch of the names out of there and got like Hile or something like that. I was like, yeah, that'll work for this dead person.
Yeah, why not? All right, man, I think it's time for us to scooch into the news. But right before we do that, remember, if you want to be part of sending in questions for the show like these two did, head over to Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at Triangle SQRD. You can be part of the post that we put over there to be there. Or the best way to do it is to hop into the Discord that we have linked in the description below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on podcast services. You can hop in there, talk to us about what we talk about on the show, talk to other listeners and members. A lot of our patrons are in there as well. You don't have to be one in order to hop in there. And we have a dedicated section where we do a call to action to get your action or your questions and topics you'd like us to discuss. And we had a handful of them today. So if you want to do that, remember, find us over there. And if you want to join the people who decided to support us on Patreon, you can head over to patreon.com/Nartech and keep this show going for as little as $1 per month without us having to, do a bunch of ads and stuff like that. It's a nice way to work it out. So, Chris, first piece of news we have is quick, simple, easy, rip the Band-Aid off. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle finally has a release date on PS5, and it is April 17th. And I got to say, I'm excited as hell for this. I think this game looks really good. It speaks to what I want out of these types of games. It's kind of got like an immersive sim look going for it. And a few months back, I learned that the team behind Machine Games is primarily made up of people who originally worked at Starbreeze, who made the Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay game that I love so much. They're a great developer. So I've heard a lot of people say that this game feels like a spiritual successor to how they approached doing a licensed game for Riddick, and that's exciting to me. So you stoked for this one, or does this one feel like it's not on your radar?
No, I think I'll definitely give it a shot, especially if I have a low cost of entry. Because
it'll be free 50 for you. I'll buy it.
There you go. It looks like a really good just like go through and play a game,
Sure.
Where even now in Granblue, it's like, oh well, there's so many places you can explore. Sometimes I'm like, okay, but I just want to keep. Can I just keep going? Can we just keep doing story and stuff?
Dude, that's exactly why I like Immortals of Aveum. For the same reason. It's just, we're going to keep telling you where to go. You can do a little bit of wide exploring, but you're funneling through to what we want you to do.
Yeah.
And
exactly. There's
something to be appreciated about that. Sometimes it's nice just to play something and be like, where do I go? What do I do next? Like Evil West, I still kind of want to go back and play that because it looks the same. It looks like you're just going to play it and you're going to have a good time for 10 hours.
Yeah, I like Evil West a lot. That was actually one I regret dropping because it was literally like I missed a collectible. I was like, fuck this. I just stopped playing.
Oh, no, Chris. Well, I know how you are. I say you're better now.
I can be. I have. That's what
I have the potential.
I've tried. So this year, it's funny. I've tried to spend more time. I've tried to pay more attention to the number of finished games than the number of like even platinums and stuff. And then as it turned out, other than Metal Gear, I've platinumed every game I finished this year. So like it doesn't, and Metal Gear is just a conscious choice because I'm like, I'm going to go through all of these games in release order, and then I'm going to play timeline order and get the platinum in all of them. So,
Okay.
I have to play them all twice. So,
bold choice. But yeah,
so
you've already fucked up timeline order. So I mean, yeah, in terms of starting there. So
yeah,
oh well.
Yeah, so we'll see. I gotta start 3 soon. That one's just been daunting, dude. I've been like,
Well, are you going to start 3 before the Delta remake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was curious.
Because I did this because I want to play 4. So that's why I started.
Well, one of my friends was like, and of course it's like what, August, April, in August, yeah. Something like that. One of my friends the other day was not aware that it was coming out. We were talking about it when we were talking about the new Death Stranding trailer. And he was like, I saw another screenshot for something and it had like, it said Metal Gear Solid, but it had like a triangle. It's like, oh, it's Delta. And he was like, why'd they rename it after we started talking about the fact that it was a remake for 3? And I was like, well, I think it's really that 3 is supposed to be like first in the storyline. Sort of. Depends on what you want to say. But basically, I think that they did this so that people who have never played a Metal Gear game can feel like they're hopping in without having to go, wait, I haven't played 1 or 2. I think that's literally it. They just want this to be Metal Gear Solid and the Delta. No one's going to register that. They're just going to see Metal Gear Solid. They're like, I've heard a lot about this.
Yeah. And I love Metal Gear because the way they do it, because it exemplifies exactly why like I'm a person who like you should not play the prequel first. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like some of my friends will like wholeheartedly recommend Yakuza 0 to be your first one. I'm like, no. That's awful.
I want to tell you, I didn't even play 0, but if I would have started with 0, I don't even think I would have I don't think I would have ever beat a Yakuza game. Starting with Kiwami, I beat it and I enjoyed it. And then I tried to go to 0 after. And it's worse because 0 was made before Kiwami. So some of the gameplay things and production things that I was used to were not in that game yet. And 0 was kind of just harder for me to get into. And I ended up dropping it.
Yeah. I mean, I just mean in terms of story. Because it's like...
That's fair. It's like, what do you know about Majima?
Yeah. And
how is this going to land for you in the same way?
It's like, oh, well, now I know the backstory of why Majima was like that. And I'm like, but you're not supposed to. You're supposed to just not understand why he's the way he is until you play 0, like close to the end of the arc. Like, that's how prequels work. They explain events that you've seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at someone and be like, bro, you got to play Chains of Olympus before you play God of War 1.
No, it only pays off because of everything you did.
Like, dude, Chains of Olympus literally does not pay off, in my opinion, if you did not go through the beginning of God of War or the ending of God of War 1, where you have the scene where you're like in your head and Ares is fucking with you and you're having to like hug your wife and daughter to heal them while you're fighting off the shit. That's a really cool scene. And the context of knowing how it all happened makes the Calliope part in Chains of Olympus really cool. If you just play that in a vacuum, you're just like, okay, I know who this is, but all of the impact is lost. Having to push her off. That's... Come on.
Yeah.
Come on. What?
Imagine if you played that first and you don't... the game doesn't really tell you why this is all happening, so...
Yeah, it assumes you know something, which is cool. That's why I think sometimes people are like, well, why did they come out with Metal Gear Solid 3 as the first in the storyline, but the third game? I'm like, because it's cool storytelling. Bouncing around timelines can be really cool. Yeah. It's also cool to play things in a linear story. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but if every story was always linear, it might get boring. It's kind of cool to have a game where they're like, this new game takes place 20 years before the last game. Shit. Okay, thanks.
Exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, this looks good to me. I'm excited to see what it ends up coming around to. But a lot of stuff in April, because if I'm not mistaken, April is when Days Gone is hitting. It's when Indiana Jones is hitting. And it's also, it may be May. I think it's early May is when Lost Soul Aside's finally hitting. So I have a lot of games in a short window that I want to play. But it feels good to be excited. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Speaking of God of War, this next piece of news is kind of interesting because a few years back, I was saying that one of the things I wish Sony would do spin-offs for some of their bigger franchises. and do games with lower budgets. Now, there's no proof that this is indeed what I'm talking about, but because there's not a whole lot of information on it, I'm excited to see if it's going to be something like that, because I think this is a truly missed opportunity for PlayStation if they don't do it. So according to journalist Jeff Grubb, a new God of War side story project set in Greece is expected to be released this year. Grubb clarified that this is not a remastered collection, but an entirely new project. This information aligns with earlier reports suggesting that the next installment in the series might return to Greek mythology. Additionally, Sony has announced plans to celebrate the franchise's 20th anniversary, including new in-game content for God of War Ragnarok, new merchandise, and a physical art exhibition. And all that's been going on. They're doing cool God of War facts and stuff. And a lot of people have been just kind of knowing that we're not going to get any kind of announcement of a remake of the first game or a collection, even though it's not entirely clear to me that those collections are not happening. It just seems like they're not happening now, like they're not going to release anytime soon. But I'm all for this, even the return to Greek mythology. Now, I do think most of the Greek mythology stuff has been set for Kratos, but this is a side story. Mm-hmm. My question here, Chris, is God of War and Kratos are kind of synonymous. A lot of this talk happened whenever Atreus was introduced, and people had this feeling of, are they trying to build towards God of War without Kratos, and how do I feel about that? Well, this is a really easy way for us to kind of have this moment and going back to Greek mythology feels like an easy time to break away from Kratos and go to a different character in this world and explore another story. But how do you feel about that? Do you think that that's actually the right call, or do you think Sony's going to kind of give it this Legend of Zelda treatment where it took 35 years before we got a Zelda game where you didn't play as Link? And even then you play as fucking Zelda. Yeah. So,
I would be wary of another character. Because I think if I'm playing God of War, I'm expecting a certain level of action, which is why
you think Kratos can only give that.
No, not only Kratos, but I sure as shit don't want to play as his fucking son. So like that to me, and that, in a side game, if it's advertised and shown properly, sure, but I just think God of War implies something different than, I don't know, Legolas or whatever he is. So, I guess like I'd like to see them explore other stories, but at a certain point, it's like, what other stories, right? Like, are we gonna see?
You mean like other characters' stories?
Yeah, other characters, other Kratos stories, any of that. It's like, what do I really need to know? Unless you're gonna put me in like another pantheon and there's another Kratos type character, like, oh, Judas, you're playing as Judas, and this is why all this stuff happened. Like, that could be interesting.
That'd be really interesting. It turns out that's exactly what old Ken Ken's new game is. Well, Judas is actually you playing as Judas as he betrays Jesus.
Kratos in his old age has realized he doesn't always need to be the one to give out the violence.
Yeah. I actually have a curiosity of where they might be going, and part of me thinks that this is the type of this feels like a nugget that they provide to give little explanation, and then people would go off and fill out with fan fiction. And I don't really love the fact that I do feel like this is plausibly where they might be going. But do you remember there's a point in the game where they're talking about why Kratos named Atreus what he did. And he said that back in Sparta, there was his friend that he had that was in the army with him, and his name was Atreus. And that's why he named Atreus after him. What do you think the chances are that they're going back and making a game out of the adventure that Kratos had with Atreus that gave him this feeling that he needed to honor Atreus's life that had been lost with his son? And that way you get to have Kratos and you have a clear reason for Kratos to be there, but it still ties big picture into the rest of the series.
I mean, again, it's interesting, but wouldn't Kratos not be Kratos at that point?
It depends, because like the thing about the way that the first 3 games work is that there's very little window. Definitely because some of the time between has already been filled by Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, and even more so, whether or not this game is canon or not, there was a NGO game called God of War Betrayal. And actually, you should look it up. It's pretty cool looking. It's like a sprite-based Kratos that did real-time action combat on a fucking phone. Weird shit, but I don't know if that's considered
Oh, holy shit.
canon or not. I don't think it is.
It's an iPhone game?
It's not iPhone. It's before iPhone. It's fucking it's like NGO or whatever that fucking phone was called. It was like earlier form of smartphone. It's like mobile gaming. It's like mobile gaming if it had never learned about monetization. It's what mobile gaming could have been if you actually look into it. But regardless, it feels like it'd have to be. It feels like at most that it could be would be in the time between Kratos surrendering himself to Ares and Chains of Olympus, which Chains of Olympus happens like right before 1 in a lot of ways. And so Kratos could still be in the army and still could have that situation. But again, what's interesting there? What's going to feel like to scale for a God of War game?
Yeah. What I'd like to see, I don't think they'll do this, but I'd like to see between 3 and God of War.
And 4, yeah.
Yeah. Because
his exit from Greek mythology, from the Greek lands.
And like, wouldn't it be kind of interesting if they made this tiny like boss rush game and it tells the story of Kratos, once God of War 3 ends and I think he falls, right? No, he just disappears.
He's
2 like he falls. Right? 2 it ends with
3, him. In 3, he's like, he has the sword and you see him and he's bleeding out, and then the camera comes back around after the credits and
gone, right?
He's just gone, which implies that he did something, pulled himself off the cliff. You don't know,
right?
It's just vague enough to be interesting.
So it's like, what if it's this mini?
We haven't talked about fucking Ascension. Ascension takes place before 1 as well.
Jesus,
fuck.
But no, I'm thinking like, what if it's a game starring Kratos right after the Greek trilogy, and it turns out he first landed in Celtic mythology, and that story is him trying Greek, to get through.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, it's just like, why go back there? This will probably be cool, and it'll probably
without
be
it being
story.
a remake. That's the thing. Like, if it's a remake, that's obvious and cool. And I love the Greek games, and I'd be honestly, the problem I have with the remake is I feel like they try to remake it like God of War 2018. And while I like that, I fucking want the hack and slash crazy locked in cameras just looking gorgeous.
Well, and it's like you have to wonder,
you
like,
make it a little dynamic, but
are they gonna? I don't want to say censor, but like, are they gonna change the game in ways like? Because if you do that, right, like let's say they remake 1, 2, and 3, and they take away all the shitty stuff about Kratos, right, and then it makes God of War look worse. Like, it doesn't way look worse. The same.
That monster
Kratos,
scene, that sucks. If he is not who he is in God of War, fucking Ascension through 3. Then the scene of I don't even want to fucking. It feels like bad to spoil, but the monster scene that I'm talking about in God of War is pointless.
And
loses all weight.
So like, that's why I'm almost like tentative of them even touching it, because they clearly, I'm not trying to sit here and have like a woke conversation or whatever, but like Sony's clearly veering away from Kratos using women as doorstops. So like, you can't. Can you do that? Can you remake those games and maintain Kratos as a literal piece of shit with taking those stuff off? And I'm to be very clear, I'm not making an argument that you can't tell this story without him doing that kind of stuff. But that was all like, You can tell a redemption story without him using women as doorstops and sleeping with every woman. You can.
You can, but it's not Kratos' story. That's the whole point, is that like Kratos is like seeking some form of intimacy that he doesn't really have, but it's fleeting and like surface level, and that's why he treats everybody this way. And I don't know, there's just things about Kratos where it's like, dude, if Kratos doesn't fucking sacrifice the priest to the altar in God of War 2 for the Sister of Fate, like that's fucking necessary in my opinion.
Yes, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about a scene where the solution of the puzzle is to take an innocent woman and stuff and break her body for no reason just to get through a door. And I'm saying
it's not no reason. It's to show that Kratos he's so blinded by his rage that it's utility above all. He sees an easy way to get the utility he needs from something, and instead of trying to look around and look for an alternative, it's already in front of him. Fucking do it. It's awful, but that's the purpose.
Do you consider that essential to telling the God of War story? That specific scene?
Honestly, yeah. I'll go that crazy. Yes.
I feel like you're bullshitting me, right?
No, dude. Kratos is only as much of Kratos can only be the monster. I genuinely mean this. Kratos can only be the monster if you see all of this in totality.
If they remake those games and that scene is not in it, you think his story is less impactful by God of War Ragnarok?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Because then the rest of it even kind of comes to this thing of, if that's not exactly how you view Kratos, like the people in the world, if that's not how the people of Greece view Kratos, then the rest of these things start to fall flat. The Kratos' actions and being world renowned for just being fucking hateful and willing to do whatever makes the very first scene in the very first game where the fucking boat captain refuses to let you save him because he'd rather die than be saved. It's not even the boat. Excuse me. It's not the boat captain. It's the other dude. But there's a dude who literally refuses to be saved because he'd rather die than be saved by the ghost of Sparta.
Which is crazy. Yeah. I mean, and again, circling back to it, I find the idea of trying to mine Greece to a little bit, dumb. Not dumb. Dumb's not the right word. It's just like, how much cooler would it be for like kind of what I was saying, where it's like he goes through whatever he goes through to get to the Norse thing. As far as I know, I didn't beat Ragnarok, but they don't explain how he changes mythologies. So either you have to assume Greece mythology and Norse mythology are happening on the same planet, or he went through a portal.
They do. And if they basically imply that it's like the land that you were at.
Oh, okay.
Which of course breaks a lot of the actual mythology underlying all this, but considering how much they changed Greek mythology to fit the story they wanted to tell, it hardly matters.
Yeah.
But it's like Atlas isn't holding up the world because Atlas doesn't mean shit to the people in fucking Norse mythology, but he's fucking holding the world up. Like, that's important to know.
Then doesn't he flood the entire world in 3? So
in 3, he at least floods his immediate surroundings by killing Poseidon.
I thought they said he straight up flooded the planet, like because like all the water rose. So
they don't really say anything. It's just you see a wall of water start to come across. Again, everything that you can see, which strongly implies it's the whole planet,
right?
But
I mean, but that lends even more credence because you don't go from Greece to whatever Greek. No, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. I can't come up with it off the top of my head.
Greek to Norse without crossing a few other mythologies. So like it fully makes sense. So like what if it was like Oregon Trail but with Kratos, and every once in a while you had like a tiny little boss fight with like a leprechaun man or whatever from dude. That actually sounds pretty fun.
Yeah, that would be cool. Or like retell the Odyssey, but it's Kratos, like do stuff like that and like have these side stories.
Let's get way fucking crazier with this. Use this, let's start doing some Mario shit. Make every game you can and throw God of War on it. Make a game where it's essentially like, it's just called God of War Olympus, and it's you managing Olympus as though it were like fucking roller coaster tycoon, and it's just you being able to pick up people and drop them and look at their happiness and fuck their lives up in random ways or make them happy. You have to build out a Greece so that it's nice. You build up Olympus so that people are there. You make sure that hell is bad, and you work with Hades. Like you're essentially playing all the gods by being the hand that moves everything around. Fuck it, let's do simulation God of War.
Papers, please, except Kratos is like letting people into hell.
Well, that's funny because it really, at that point, it doesn't have to be Kratos. Now it's just the world of God of War, but we're having fun.
No, but it would be way funnier if like every commercial was like, what if the God of War became the God of efficient entry into hell? You play as Kratos and you decide if each person goes from heaven to hell. Experience a heartfelt story with Kratos.
You know how easy it would be to actually just take, how many times Kratos has gone to Hades and then pulled his way back out? You could totally just make a Hades reskin that's God of War and Kratos. Pull all of his weapons in. You could have the Blade of Olympus. You could have the fucking spear that he gets in 3. You could have the little, in 3, he also gets the little, like, I don't know what you call them, but they're like these little electric chain daggers. That I don't know what the fuck you call them.
Like, what about like a .mu like Metroidvania with Kratos? I would play the shit out of that.
Dude, I would play a Metroidvania God of War so cool. That's actually my long-term thing is a Prince of Persia Lost Crown style God of War game would be so sick.
Dead Cells. That's what I want. A Dead Cells.
Also cool. And what's great about that, then it's just a fucking game for the sake of the game. You get all the characters in there, but you don't have to worry about it being canon. But what would be interesting about doing the thing is you could actually make a story if you really wanted to in terms of around the Hades idea of Kratos just going to hell every time he dies and having to pull himself back up and kind of expanding that out. And you could have like some weird shit where like he continuously sees Calliope or he sees his wife or something crazy and he has to contend with that. And he has to, like, you get to learn more about their relationship from that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Bring back Deimos.
Yeah.
You can do all sorts of shit.
Zeus is
Have
in there.
fun, is what we're getting at. Either way, it's cool to see this the 20th anniversary, but game development takes so fucking long now that it kind of does feel like, I hope this is real just because it's a cool way to celebrate the anniversary, like this monumental of an anniversary with a new title. Like I missed that when it was like, hey guys, it's Sonic's 10th anniversary. So guess what? Sonic Adventure 2, motherfuckers. Like, that shit was cool. But if only we'll get there one of these days. It may have been like the 5-year anniversary, I think is what it was, but regardless, I actually think Sonic's 10-year anniversary was Sonic 06.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
96,
but still, again, a game that was like, hey, we got to have a game out for the anniversary because that's just what you do now. Mm-hmm. So if nothing else, remasters of the old games or a remaster. I'm almost curious of what we're going to see this month is that the 2 PSP games hit PS4, PS5 to where you can play them with trophy support.
Oh, I would fucking shit if I could play Chains of Olympus again.
Yeah, be so great. I love that fucking game. Anyway, and look, they already have the trophy stuff figured out. They did a remaster of those for PS3. So
I might play that.
Do what you want. We're going to go ahead and skip into the next one here. Saros happens with Sony. So, Ilari Cruitt, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know how to say that name. Anyway, the CEO of Housemarque stated that the development of their upcoming game, Saros, was made possible by Sony's acquisition of the studio in 2021. He noted that as an independent studio, they couldn't have made such investments. Development for Saros began in 2022 with a budget in the tens of millions of euros, comparable to Remedy's Alan Wake 2. He also reflected on the studio's past challenges and emphasized that joining Sony provided stability and resources for ambitious projects. And yeah, that's right. Like that's the happy-go-lucky side of acquisition. And since Returnal was a critical darling and seemed to have sold pretty well, you get to keep on going in this direction. The flip side of that is getting bought by Sony and then becoming Concord. So it's acquisitions are always it's always rocky. For as much as they give you stability and the ability to say, hey, we've got locked in funding, it also means that at any given time your fate is out of your hands.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of people doom and gloom about it, but you do have to go into it relatively positively, especially if you're an independent studio. Like if you're an HR guy at Bethesda, you're upset when Microsoft buys you, but like you work at a Housemarque or even like the Double Fine, right? Like you're like, okay,
Sure.
nobody's buying a studio like that with the intention of shutting them down, so you have to at least feel pretty secure, on top of even getting, like these guys said, more money for the next game. So
when you think about how much more reasonably priced these studios are and how much more arguably, I guess you'd call headroom that they have to experiment and fail before Sony starts going, you cost too much, you continue to cost too much. Like, we saw what happened with Bungie because Bungie was such an expensive purchase that Sony had to kind of be like, hey, we spent a lot of money on you and you're expensive to run. So we kind of need you to figure your shit out.
yeah. Well, it's like, nobody's, at least I would think, I'm definitely not an idiot CEO who doesn't know the industry sometimes, which makes you wonder about some of these guys. But for me, it's like, if I'm buying Remedy, I know that like I'm buying, an auteur who's not going to sell me 100 million copies of, Alan Wake 2, but I am going to be that niche place that has, we've got Horizon, we've got God of War, and we've got this weird ass fucking horror author game,
Yeah.
So so that's my thing is like especially with these smaller companies and assuming that they don't have sketchy books like Bungie, you got to think like, okay, well, we know what we're buying, we know we're buying Remedy's going to make a $50 million game and it's probably going to make $51 million, but we're okay with that because we've got Remedy games. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's kind of like we're at that point, it's like acquiring for portfolio as opposed to acquiring for, like, it's still good business because you're not losing money and you're securing critical darlings, which is important, right? You want games that people do go, wow, this was made. Can you believe it? But at the same time, I think I want to play devil's advocate, not necessarily against you, but just in the fact that those games are getting made without having to be first party is great.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Yeah. So it goes to show that thankfully no one's having to do this thing where we only get these types of games because somebody decided to buy and back these people. Thankfully, people are still just wanting to back these people at an investor level. So where somebody like Remedy can stay independent, which is ultimately the better thing. Like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't flip out if Sony bought Remedy because I think the way that they make games and the type of, I guess, how much they focus on story driven. I think Remedy and Sony is probably one of the better fits in the industry if there was going to be a buyer. I don't think that there's really much of a better fit, if I'm being honest. All the other, like EA would just try and have too much control over what was going on. I feel like they would probably end up shutting down a Remedy. Ubisoft would be like, how do we try and monetize this and make this a yearly thing? How can we do all these things? Don't need that. And so, yeah, if there is a purchaser, oddly enough, Sony seems to be the best fit for it. What I probably would have said if it would have come down to it is if Private Division would have kept going, I think that they were pointing in a direction where maybe they would have been a good fit. But good thing that didn't happen because that shit crashed and burned for whatever reason. So yeah, this is cool. I'm glad to see that this is a clear example of someone being happy they were bought. At least this is a CEO. He probably made a lot of money off of this deal, to be fair. But I don't think that there's been a lot of widespread talk of people at Housemarque that are in the standard day-to-day development being upset about this purchase either. So it just seems like this was an all-around good move, good purchase. Everyone's happy, and we're getting a cool game as a result.
We do love to see everybody happy.
All right, Chris, your boy's coming up. He failed you once. Will he fail you again? Sony has established a new first-party studio, Dark Outlaw Games, led by Jason Blundell, a key figure behind Call of Duty Zombies mode, and as well as a lot of I didn't realize how many of the campaigns for the Call of Duty series he is behind. The Black Ops 3 campaign's sick, and he was behind that. That's really cool. Oh, yeah. So Blundell departed from Activision's Treyarch in 2020 after a 13-year tenure and later co-founded Deviation Games. Now, as you may remember, Sony partnered with Deviation, but did not start them under their own wing. It was just a partnership. But unfortunately, Deviation closed in 2024 without ever releasing a title. Chris has a shirt to commemorate them, which is kind of why I made this, because Concord didn't even get a shirt.
No.
They got a
a
controller though.
Amazon show too.
That's true. They did get that. I still haven't watched that.
Me neither, man.
I need to watch it though. It looks good. Anyway, so in an interview with Jeff Gerstmann, Blundell revealed that Dark Outlaw Games is currently recruiting staff and will share details about its inaugural project in the future. He expressed gratitude for the opportunity to create a studio within PlayStation Studios, noting that Sony rarely initiates first-party studios, making this endeavor particularly humbling. This is cool. But at the same time, I've learned to not put too much eggs in a basket. Sony has been buying a lot of things, and I really do wonder how much the actual perceivable difference will be between some of these things that Sony bought into early enough versus Sony just choosing to start a studio internally, which is very rare for them. But I guess the guy does have a bit of a track record. I don't know how much his involvement with Deviation. Clearly, it didn't dissuade Sony from wanting to work with him. So I think whatever was going on in Deviation must have been not
in
because
spite of.
Yeah. So this is interesting, but I think that you had a lot of hope for Deviation, Chris. So is that kind of going to shift over and you're just going to graft that onto this and kind of pick up where you left off, or are you being a little more hesitant because of how Deviation went?
I mean, I'm always wary of new studios. You know, obviously it's fresh people, but Deviation, I thought that the talent was there, and I still think the talent is there. They seem to have, you know, from listening to other shows, they seem to have brought some talent in that sounds like they would have the experience to make something good. For me, I'm just curious to see what this is going to be. This doesn't scream multiplayer shooter just from the just from the logo and the name of the studio. So I don't know. That's kind of my guess, but what do you think? What do you think they're making?
Man, that's my thing.
Right now.
I feel like it's new IP. I don't think Sony nor Jason really have much interest in trying to shoehorn into an existing IP.
No, I don't think so.
And the next piece of news, I think, is more likely to be a question of, is it new IP or a revival of some sort? But I think that this is clearly some kind of first party, like, hey, this is our first real initiative into trying to make a first person shooter that is more of a complete package.
Well, that's my question. You think they're making a first person shooter?
I do, but I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a Concord style. I don't think it's going to be online only. I think they're going to try and do, this might be a little bit of wishful thinking, but my hope is that Sony still really does see the value in what people know Sony for, which is really great first-party stories and campaigns, and that he has a lot of the most memorable Call of Duty campaigns under his belt. And so I'm hoping that what they're doing is wanting something that can have the online presence of a Call of Duty and of some of these other big games, Halo and all that, but still can kind of go to the people. I guess it's like bifurcating. You get to have, for the people like me who don't care about the online aspect as much, we still get to see this cool campaign that you can do all this great stuff in. It's got great storytelling, cool characters, all this. And then we also get to do something different in the multiplayer sphere. Now, what exactly type of first-person shooter are we talking? That's a curiosity. Could this be more like a Stalker-style open-world shooter? Could this maybe a little bit smaller scale and like a Metro style where it's like hubs that you're kind of exploring, but moving forward in a somewhat linear fashion? Or is this going to be a straight up Call of Duty-esque campaign where it's just bombastic for 5 to 8 hours and then you move on to your big your big multiplayer suite? What do you want out of this, ideally?
I'd love a like really focused single player shooter. I'm sure that's not what I'm going to get, but that's what I'd like to see. It would be interesting to see them go in like a direction of like, we're going to make our own modern military shooter and it's going to be fucking sick. I wonder what they could do. Could they do like Would they be ballsy enough to do like an Iraq war shooter?
Ooh.
I think that would be sick.
See, I think that I would love for Sony to be ballsy enough to try and make something first person, but that takes a lot of inspiration from what made Spec Ops: The Line so cool.
Oh God.
Like, I actually think that's the best way Sony can approach doing a first person shooter, and I do think that would stand out in the market.
Yeah.
I just how ballsy can you be? You know, it's like when you get bigger and bigger as a company, you start trying to avoid doing something internally. Like them allowing the 6 days in Fallujah, if it ever ends up making it out on their system, is one thing. Did it make it out?
It's on. It's out on early access on Steam.
Okay, so it's not out on PlayStation yet, but it's early access, and presumably, as far as we can tell, it'll make it to PlayStation.
Yeah, it'll be.
And Sony will just be like, "Hey, we're just a platform." You know, we're not the controversy, but if they're the ones greenlighting the controversy, there's more of a reason for them to be like, are we sure we want to do that? So, but at the same time, I think that they let Naughty Dog do a lot with The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of pushing controversial things, including religious storylines. And it's not the main story. I mean, clearly that's not the point of The Last of Us 2 is actually very little to do with religion or any of that, for being honest. But at the same time, some of that was kind of poached and pushed. And if we're to believe them for this heretic, they're letting Naughty Dog make a game that is strong religious overtones, backing a lot of its story. So maybe, you know, I'd like to say that Sony is still willing to be that ballsy, but I also think, I know you liked Concord, but I think some of Concord actually was designed by committee, trying not to offend everyone, trying to include everyone.
That's 100% what it was. Yeah,
you just sort of end up with something that looks like the SpongeBob episode where he's rounded off, and then hi, lovely weather we're having. Yeah. It's just it's not that it's bad. It's just it doesn't stand out enough to be interesting. And while I may be wrong on that, if I'm not wrong on that, and there's even an ounce of truth to that, I hope Sony really took that to heart. We're like, yeah, you can't make games that way. You can't make art that way. It just ends up saying nothing and doing nothing.
Concord really did not say much, even though I did like it. Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's cool. It was a pretty solid mechanical back end, right?
Yeah, I thought it was.
It just would have been cool if a lot of the rest of the shit was more interesting on top of that.
Yeah.
But oh well.
If it was even remotely unique.
Which I'll give them this. It's getting harder and harder by the day. The
True.
more creators are able to make stuff, you know, there's a point in time where I was thinking about it as I was playing Horizon, where I'm looking and I'm like, damn, in 2017, I was like, wow, someone thought about having it where you would hunt big robot animals and dinosaurs and shit. How has no one ever thought of this before? And that seems to be getting harder. But I'm sure that there will come a game soon where I'm like, damn, no one thought of that before.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, you can only do so much in a video game. And it'll be interesting.
Well, we got one more here that's going to round out the episode before we get into a couple of listener questions. And this one's interesting as well. It's People Can Fly. The Polish studio known for developing games like Outriders and Gears of War Judgment has entered into a work-for-hire agreement with Sony Interactive Entertainment to create a prototype based on one of Sony's existing intellectual properties. So that answers your question as to whether it's original or new, right? Or whether it's original or a revival. But this says the specific franchise involved has not been disclosed. This collaboration aligns with Sony's strategy to leverage its portfolio of classic game franchises by partnering with external developers. Herman Hulst, co-CEO of PlayStation, has emphasized the company's openness to reviving past IPs and developing new franchises to offer a broad range of experiences. In addition to this project with Sony, People Can Fly has also been involved in several other ventures. In 2023, they signed an agreement with Microsoft to develop a game codenamed Project Maverick, a fully funded project with a budget between 30 and 50 million. Furthermore, the studio is co-developing Gears of War E-Day with the Xbox. Xbox is the coalition, marking a return to the franchise they previously contributed to. Despite these collaborations, People Can Fly has faced challenges, including the cancellation of a co-op action RPG codenamed Project Dagger after its original publisher, Take-Two Interactive, dropped the project in 2022. Additionally, the studio reportedly laid off over 30 developers working on an unannounced Square Enix game. All right. People Can Fly have made a lot of different games, but I think one of the big through lines for them has been third-person shooting. But they have made first-person shooters. What do you think this is in terms of, in the grand scheme of all of the franchises that Sony has that deal with third-person shooting or first-person shooting and are fairly mostly about that? What franchise do you think People Can Fly is most equipped to handle?
Resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I might agree with you. I feel like it might be this sounds bad. I don't mean this in a bad way. There's a certain quirkiness, less groundedness to some degree that People Can Fly tend to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a game like Killzone prides itself on how realistic it is, whereas like Resistance kind of allowed itself to just be crazy in the name of like, look at this crazy thing. So I think Resistance is a good fit. And I also think Resistance is honestly a better fit than Killzone to come back.
I think Killzone as like a Rainbow Six Siege type game could work, and that doesn't
specific.
Yeah, because like think about it, you could be like, oh, the sniper Hellgast, you know, all this kind of stuff. You have all the characters, sure. I think it would be cool. But just thinking about this and like having played like Bulletstorm or Gears of War Judgment or Outriders, like they seem to me like the creative, like, you know, interesting weapons, you know, telling this story that's not grounded, you know, and that's where people had suggested, oh, they must be working on Killzone. I'm like, no, they're the opposite of somebody you would put on Killzone. Like right now, like I think if you know what would be kind of interesting is like the Hell Let Loose developers doing a Killzone. If you want to go with it, obviously make it a little bit more arcadey than that game is, but that would be more interesting. To me, they just fit Resistance so well.
Yeah, well, and I'm trying to think of like a few other, but I think even if you try to look through some of their others, like they don't strike me as an obvious fit for Siphon Filter, nor do I really know that Sony has enough care to want to do anything with Siphon Filter.
Yeah.
So that starts to kind of push that one out. And also, People Can Fly don't strike me as an obvious developer for doing like espionage and like, you know dramas
okay.
around.
Let me pitch you. It will never be what I'm about to say. But this is what fits the best. People Can Fly rebooting Pursuit Force.
Pursuit Force. Interesting. I don't... I think the only reason I'd be hesitant on that is Pursuit Force seems very into the car combat thing. Like if I'm going to be honest with who should probably do that, the team that worked on Mad Max should probably do that, because that game feels Avalanche. So similar, but you can kind of pump it up. Though there's a real curiosity. Can a game like Pursuit Force scale up in a way that would make sense in the AAA world?
Well, that's why I think they would be good for it. Because like you would start the mission in a car, do the car chase, and then you get out of the car and you're doing this whole like first person shooting, taking down the criminals, going through, you know, doing investigations, like blow it out into like you play as this cop, this super cop on a super team of task force and all this kind of stuff that they do in Pursuit Force and really expand that out. Obviously, I think just the nature of what Pursuit Force is, it would never be made today. It's police brutality simulator. So like they're not going to do that now, but it would be fascinating.
Shit.
What?
I just had like the craziest fucking memory of a game. It's not a Sony first party game. But there was this game that I watched my buddy play almost all of on PlayStation 3 called Turning Point Fall of Liberty. And I don't know why it came to mind, but it did. It's Resistance esque,
Yeah.
but it's very double A. I can't describe it, but it was interesting. I don't know why. What I was kind of thinking through was some of the PS3, PS2 era shooters. So I could think of what other games Sony might be wanting to do something like this with. Because, like, I'm pretty sure Ubisoft still owns the rights to Haze, and I don't think Sony would be ballsy enough to try.
Dude,
nor do I think
so funny.
Nor do I think Haze is like a shining example of an IP that people miss. Though I will go on the limb and say Haze had wasted potential. I still think the concept is cool if it was executed better. I would love to see someone reapproach Haze. But, you think Mag, Resistance. This sounds weird, but honestly, I don't completely hate them. But again, how big is this franchise versus where Sony's trying to put this? I could see them doing a Starhawk-like game. That actually feels the most like People Can Fly stylistically of all of them.
I can see that. That would be good.
It doesn't strike me as an obvious choice for Sony to go, this is the IP that people have been begging for. Because people really haven't. People have asked more for Warhawk than Starhawk. But even then, Warhawk's a completely different type of game.
Dude, I think I know what it could be, and it's so lame. If I'm right, I'll be upset. Helldivers single player.
In a weird way, I can kind of see it.
Like, it works, but I don't want it.
It does. I can kind of imagine the way that they approach Bulletstorm being kind of pulled into this for Helldivers. And honestly, you could do it Helldivers first person.
Oh, yeah. There's no reason you couldn't. Tell this story of this really high-end Helldivers crew that has survived so many battles that they actually were allowed to have a personality kind of thing. So it's like, think of actually, okay, see, the more I think about it, the more interested in the idea I am of like a Battlefield Bad Company Helldivers game.
Yeah. So, Chris, do you recall
the most famous reindeer of all?
Yes.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Do you recall about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there being a game that was leaked for PlayStation?
Gears of Effect?
Yeah,
I remember.
But this clearly doesn't seem to be that. So what the fuck was that?
I don't know. I don't know if we've ever heard anything else about it.
And who was the developer? A lot of people assumed that it was People Can Fly, if I remember. I don't remember if there was like actually something pointing to it or not.
I do think that was the thought, yeah.
That's the weird thing. There's been so many like real leaks that seemingly have led to nothing that I'm just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, it's not even a PlayStation game, but there's an old Xbox game that had like a lizard in it as one of the players. I'm trying to find it.
Like OG Xbox?
Yeah. It's brutal something. Either way, that would have been fun. I can't think of any good ones, but like honestly, a Helldivers Bad Company game sounds like the way to go. Or Killzone Bad Company game.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is like, what's the value in taking a beloved IP that already exists and trying to spin it in a new direction? Sometimes it works. And sometimes people pull off some pretty cool shit with it. But it also doesn't strike me as obvious.
I knew I had it. Brute Force. This one.
Oh, Brute Force. Yeah. Isn't that the one that you could speak into the microphone on?
I'm not sure about that.
And issue commands?
$9.99 for Brute Force. God damn, we're old, man.
Yeah. That's just kind of how it works, man.
All right, fucking nihilist. You're supposed to be upset about it.
I mean, oh, damn, we're getting older. Then we're just a pessimist, right? Either way, look, this is cool. I like People Can Fly, but also they've kind of been one of those developers that just seems to barely skate by the edge of their seat consistently, which is good. I'm glad to see it. Like Outriders seem to do well, but never well enough. Also, it was Square Enix, and Square Enix has always seemingly had crazy numbers. And then they're supposed to be working on an unannounced game for Square Enix. Is that just more fucking Outriders, or does Square go, nah, I'm not going to do it anymore? Hard to say. That's a curiosity I have for people. So people who know People Can Fly by name, if you're listening and you know that, comment down below, hop in the Discord. I want to hear what IP from Sony's history you would like to see People Can Fly work on if you have any kind of familiarity with their work, because they are a weird developer who I think is fairly flexible. But you still kind of know you're going to get a certain type of game from them. So it's just like, what do you prescribe to it? Like, how fucking weird do you get? I don't think they're going to go. I don't think they're going to go car combat. You know, like it's not People Can Fly working on the next Twisted Metal where you can get out of your car and shoot each other too.
Dude, I'm going to be so real. I started that conversation about the Helldivers game as this would be terrible, and now I desperately want to play a fucking buddy comedy game set in the Helldivers universe, which is bombastic action. Oh my god! So
basically, Battlefield Hardline, but
no, Battlefield Bad Company 2.
Company. Yeah, it's actually the best example.
Helldivers.
Yeah. But yeah, with that level of destructibility, that'd be pretty sweet too,
dude. Hell, fucking yeah! Give it the same story. You got to go find whatever the element is. Oil. Go find oil, and it's being protected by a bunch of these, the enemies, and you're going and fighting them. Oh my god, it would be so fun.
No,
now I want it.
To coincide with E-Day. You're working. It wouldn't come at the same day, but to riff off of E-Day, you're making a Helldivers game with People Can Fly, where they imagine the scenario and what happens if all of the different factions do make it to Super Earth.
Yeah,
and they're invading, and so you're having to like storm off and shoot bugs down and destroy houses in the mix.
No, because now you're talking about a live service game, and I want the focused single player Helldivers game from People Can Fly.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I still wait for the day that you finally play all of Resistance 3, just because it's so fucking good. It's so good.
It'll happen.
It'll be incredible. All right, man, that's the last thing we have here. So let's knock out a couple questions and let's get off here. I've had a long day, so slightly quicker episode doesn't bother me. This one's pretty interesting. There wasn't a great spot to slide it in, but I'm curious what your thoughts are here too. So, Chris, we've talked a lot about our own preferences for how video game adaptations happen. I tend to fall on the side of wanting something that's a little bit more original, and you seem to not necessarily mind when it's a one-for-one adaptation. But we have a question from Rude Days 93, longtime listener and patron. He says, would you like it if a game story is continued through a TV show or movie if a sequel to said game is not coming out? Example, Last of Us story continuing through TV, but no more games. So, Chris, I defer to you. Let's slightly change it. Days Gone's never going to get another game, but we'll get a series in where it picks up off of the end of the first game and moves forward.
No, and the reason why is because you guys can write in about all the video game stories you love. Video game stories are not good. 99 out of 100 video game stories is not good. And the best video game stories would not be good television. So
I think I do and don't agree with you. I agree with you mostly in the fact that video game stories they have a different purpose.
Yeah.
They serve an entirely different purpose. Yeah. They are primarily made to just give you a reason for the series of cool moments that you want your game to have. Mm-hmm. And so it's a great way to do that. But because of that, they tend to get written in various quality levels that will just allow them to facilitate whatever gameplay moments they want to create. But not always, right? There's some really, I think it's dual. Sometimes I think what it is like you said, some of the best video game stories would not make good TV, and I agree. And it's because the best video game stories leverage the medium, and the interactivity is a big part of it. And you lose that the moment you try and go towards making a television show. For me, a good example of that is doing something like The Last Guardian, where you can make a show about a boy who gets kidnapped from this creature and then falls with it. And it's still, you could totally make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd probably still be like, oh, that was kind of sad. That was a cool story and everything. But as a game, the reason it works so well is because you, as a player, are interacting with this creature and growing your own form of attachment with it through action instead of just watching. You're not growing a disconnected attachment. You're actually growing a direct attachment. And that gets lost. So the final scene of that game, which is beautiful, and I fucking bawled, I don't think I'd cry if I watched that on TV. It's not the same thing.
Well, it's like, even in, like, maybe a hot take here, but like BioShock is a game that I love, and I love the story. But like, imagine like some of those sections on TV, going through, let me go through this entire place to get the shock plasmid, and that's your 30-minute episode. Like,
yeah, which you're not
you'd have, right?
Yeah, you would just cut that.
So I think that's my thing, is like, there's not a video game story. Like, I love Days Gone, but the next time I play it, I'm skipping the cutscenes, right? Like, I'm not there for that. Like, I like playing Days Gone because
I like the story of Days Gone.
But it's not. I wouldn't watch that story.
I wouldn't either.
And
it works as a game. I don't know how to describe it better than that.
That's why, like, The Last of Us is like, it's a rare example of something that didn't have to be changed much, because that game is basically a movie.
Yeah.
If you took the gameplay out of that game, it would be a movie. And most games are not built that way. But I don't know that, like, I would necessarily care as much about the resolution of The Last of Us if they're, in the same way as I do now, if it was a TV show, not a third game. So I'm trying to think of examples, but like the thing, if you really think about it, is like, all these things get changed. Even, this is not a spoiler, but Abby is a completely different character, basically, because in the game, they had to make Abby this ripped woman because they wanted her to seem stronger than Ellie. But in the show, they don't have to worry about that, because she can look like a normal person in the show. So
it's also really fucking hard to find a ripped ass actor. Like, you're making it almost impossible to find someone to even play the role at that point. Well, yeah, you're going to have an easier, and Ellie's younger in this adaptation, so Abby has to be somewhat younger herself.
Yeah, either way, like the whole adaptation of the one story that I think does translate super well is altered because it doesn't need to make sense in the same way on TV. So
true.
I would be hard pressed to have much of an answer. Something like Yakuza, you have to have a story that stands out so much that, like, you would want to see it in something else. And like, Yakuza is a soap opera, but like, a lot of that stuff is the crazy gameplay. It's the, doing a mission for a giant crab in Yakuza 7. Like, that shit's funny, and that doesn't translate super well. So I don't know. Well, it's great for me because the new season of MLB is coming out this week. So it's great. My favorite game is going to be translated pretty well.
Well, to directly answer the question, I think I mostly agree with Chris that more often than not, it's going to be difficult to do it in a way that feels right and able to keep going. But at the same time, I think for certain games and for certain stories that were left hanging, it does feel in my mind like something that's better than nothing. And again, this is a good example of a game that I think translates well just because of the focus that it built. If we're truly never going to get anything else with The Order, I'd be okay with a season of The Order.
The Order's a movie.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's a good example of a series that can translate.
Example, yeah.
And that just so happens to be something that's very, very unlikely to ever get another game, and does lend itself well to being translated in that direction. But as I've long said, my favorite adaptations they've done so far are for things that don't even have stories that are like that. Like, don't worry, Twisted Metal has a story and they're fun, but they're short and self-contained, and you're playing through a character story and you're seeing that character story, and then it changes for the next one. That doesn't make for good TV unless you're trying to do the Twilight Zone, where every episode's able to be something different, which is actually kind of fucking fun. I wouldn't have minded if they did Twisted Metal as a Twilight Zone series, where it's just every episode is following a different racer who goes through this tournament, wins, and you see what they get from it, what their struggles were, why they chose to do the race. But I fucking love the Twisted Metal series, and it's because it's so barely connected to the games that it's able to have a ton of fun.
Yeah, I think like I would be more interested in stories in worlds, right?
Yeah, I think Fallout was good for that same reason. Yeah. It's not trying to follow an exact game. So actually, to his point, we're clearly going to get more Fallout, but the Fallout series was actually pretty good, and it does give you more Fallout without having to have a game. So it can be done. Certainly, it can be done.
Yeah. For me, I think like I guess my point when answering the question is like I wouldn't want to see a resolution to a story I cared about in a game. I'd like to see, if I was going to say anything, I'd say I want to see it all retold. Yeah, in a show. I'd want to see it all retold. So like,
yeah. So like redo Days Gone as a TV show
for
the and same season 1 and then continue it. Yeah.
Do Sleeping Dogs and tell me the original story on TV and then continue the story after that. But don't be like
consistent with the changes that you had to make anyway.
Right. And they're making a movie. I think Simu Liu is playing the character and he's the one who got it off the ground.
Yeah.
I hope that's telling the first one. Don't tell me what happens next. Show me on TV an adapted story for this. Because there shouldn't be an episode of me going shopping with my crime boss's wife because I have to steal a monk outfit and learn stealth. Like that's not what I want to see in a TV show. So, you know.
Yeah. For me, those examples are always just either do that and then I'm just not going to watch it. Like I didn't watch The Last of Us 1 because I just felt like I knew it. And I know that that's just like one of those controversial things, but it's fine. But I at least respect that they were like, we're going to just do the same thing. And a lot of people don't play games, but had always heard of The Last of Us. And now they get to experience something that's so close to the games that ultimately we've experienced the same story. And that's cool. Mm-hmm. But if you're not going to do that, then go way the fuck off. Do a completely original story in that world. Kind of like you talked about. That's my thing, is have more fun with the world rather than trying to adapt a story to fit this medium. Because like you said, most video game stories don't adapt well. They're made to fit with gameplay interleaved in between them. And sometimes they're meant to break the wall a little and be aware that they're games to a degree. And that's just, you literally can't do that. Even if you made a Yakuza show, you can make it kooky and zany and then suddenly dramatic, but you're still missing a lot of what makes Yakuza because of the format that it originated in.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. My favorite moment from any of these things is like, such a weird reference, but have you seen with your daughter or at least seen the clip of the Dora the Explorer movie?
I haven't watched it with her, no.
Dude,
I've seen little bits of it.
There's a scene in that movie that I think is so fucking funny because it's a perfect adaptation where it's like Dora's parents ask her something and then she turns to the camera and goes, "Can you say delicioso?" And then it cuts back to her parents and her parents just look at her and go, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm like, that's hilarious. Like that works. And I would love to see.
It's a good one-time gag, right?
Yeah, it's like imagine if like you're in the Metal Gear movie is coming out, and then in just one of the conversations with Otacon, he's like, "Press start," and it's just Oscar Isaac goes, "What the fuck do you mean press start?" Press start to open the door. You know.
Yeah,
I would hope they would keep that.
I think it'd be funny in one of those movies to have a scene where he dies, and then you just have the snake. And then it like cuts back and he's like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah. That was like people make fun of the Prince of Persia movie and it's not very good.
Dude,
but
I thought that scene in particular was cool.
Yeah, the scene where it like shows like the path he's gonna have to take. And like that's super video gamey and I like that.
I don't think that movie's great, but it's not awful, and I didn't hate watching it. I'll probably never watch it again, but that scene is cool.
Do you want a crazy fact? I saw that movie in theaters.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah. I do like Jake Gyllenhaal, and I don't think he was a bad prince.
No.
And what's that dude's name? Bill Kingsley or Ben Kingsley? I think the bad guy. Yeah, he's great too. Man. But
he's fantastic.
That doesn't mean the rest of it was.
No.
Did you ever watch the Assassin's Creed movie?
No, and it's funny because I was just thinking that I should watch that movie.
I've never seen it either. I have no clue what to think of it, but I don't know. I could see it working as a like if you've never played the game and just were like, oh, I want to see what this assassin's business is about. I don't know. I think
They should have made that
really
like a
hard to do that.
hardcore, like The Witch style movie. Like that's the problem with video game movies. They don't have any balls. Could you imagine like a period piece called Assassin's Creed that like is a super serious, like accurate like thing with just has Ezio in it, but it's all very like grounded. I'd be super into that movie.
All right, man. We got one final question, and then we're going to wrap this up. All right. Last questions from our longtime listener, longtime patron, friend of the show, Stingray X. And he says, what is one genre you want to go back to that you haven't played in a while? It's a good question. And it's a hard one for me to answer because I think, Chris, it might be the same for you for different reasons. You kind of bounce around games to just by nature of how and you've been working on that this year, but you've had a tendency to bounce around. And so I think because of that, you end up playing a lot of genres for just a little section of time while you're trying to figure out what's going to get you to stick.
Yeah.
And I beat most games that I play, but I like to get variety. So whenever I play one game, I'm like, the next game I don't really want to be the same. And so I'll go to a completely different genre. And so I think the only real answer to this of a genre that I adore, that it's just been a while since I've gotten to play one of, is racing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited for Forza just because it seems like it's going to be a while till we get a new Need for Speed. So this is probably the closest thing to an open world racing game I'll get. And I haven't been doing racing games in a while. So I think it's my genuine answer.
I'm looking forward to Forza, actually. That's a good answer. For me, I've been really craving a new like RPG. So I went into Granblue, but it's not hitting the itch. Like I'm kind of glad that like I'm trying to spend less money because like Atomfall right now feels like a game that I want to play. But I'm like, I'm gonna not spend any more money for a while. I'm trying to cut back. So I'm like not playing it. But like I kind of really want to play it because it fit it in the descriptions I've gotten, it fits like the vibe of what I'm looking for, which is basically just like Skyrim or Fallout 3. And I don't expect the same game, but like just give me that like feeling, which is why I played a little bit of Avowed. It just didn't give me,
you're looking for a vibe.
Yeah, I'm looking for that vibe. And like Atomfall is looking like it. So hopefully I'll pick that up soon. But it's that's what I've been kind of searching for. So
well, I want to give an answer that's cause racing just feels a little too easy to get to. So I want to dig into genres that we don't actually see as often that I do wish kind of had an easier play. And even if it was just old games being more readily available on new consoles, I haven't played a simulation video game in a long time. I think the last time I played one was a Game Dev Story, which is super fun. I love that game.
Great game.
But I was super bummed to see that, like, I think I probably have said this on the show once already, but Switch just recently got the ports of Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2 that they combined into one game, and you can play it on Switch. And these were originally done for phones, so I get that. But now that they're on Switch, why the fuck aren't they on Xbox and PlayStation? Because I want to play Roller Coaster Tycoon since it basically 1 and 2 together with all the features there. I love Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I'd be down to play that. Watching my wife play The Sims, I've kind of been tempted to download the Game Boy Advance version of Sims Urbs in the City because I fucking love that game way more than the PS2 version. It's really fun, and it kind of scratches that itch while being a little more direct controlled, but being sim heavy. So that's a good one that you don't really see a lot of, I think. And then lastly, a real honest to God stealth game like a Dishonored, like a fucking, Deathloop, something like that. Preferably like an immersive sim style stealth game. So those are kind of my three.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, solid answers, huh? All right, Chris. Well, maybe Atomfall will kind of, when you finally get there, maybe it'll scratch that itch. But I can't blame you. I've been looking at saving money, considering that I already am having trouble gaming as much as I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And even whenever I do have time to game, sometimes I'm like, I want to game, but I don't know what I want to be playing. It's good to save money on top of that, which is why I kind of did that. I'm going to look through every PS Plus game to try and do something free, but there fucking wasn't anything that I was interested in enough, you know?
Maybe we both need a hit of Atom Fall. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I can always buy Atom Fall and save you the money. And honestly, after Horizon, that might be what I do. It might be Atom Fall or fucking Black Myth Wukong finally, you know, one of those two. So, all right, Chris. Well, thank you for joining me as always, sir. Is there anything you feel like I missed that you want to touch on real quick? Or are we good?
No, I'm chilling. We're good.
All right. Guys, thank you all for listening. Like we said at the beginning, if you enjoyed the show, stick around. Hope to see you next time. We post an episode every 2 weeks. So subscribe if you're on YouTube so you can be notified of the next episode coming up. If you're on podcast services, hit the subscribe button there as well. That way it'll hit your feed for you. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts on anything that we talked about this episode or want to chime in anywhere, hit us up on Twitter or X at Triangle SQRD for me. Or if you want to holler at Chris specifically, it's Chris Figs _. Am I correct? Chris is muted.
No, you didn't even need to say it. I knew. But yes, it's Chris Figs _.
You can find him over there. If you want to find both of us as well as a lot of our other listeners and patrons, head over to the Discord linked in the description below, whether you're listening on audio services or watching on YouTube. And lastly, if you want to join some of those patrons, again, head over to patreon.com/Nartech to give as little as $1 per month, like our newest patron, Mr. Ryan Goldner did. And he asked a question today. So we appreciate that. Without further ado, the way we wrap the show up is always shouting out all of the patrons that we have while that's still a reasonable thing to do. And thankfully, we have enough for it to be worth it, but also not be exhaustive. So with that in mind, going to round the show off. We'll see you next time. And a big shout out to Ryan Goldner, Low Rate, Nate, Duh Overlord, Spencer, Brandon Edwards, Alex, Barry Rogers, Stingray X, Matt Tubbs, Easton 328, Bailey Robertson, Mark Schutz, Rude Days 93, Kevin Bacon Bits, Danny Villalobos, Jehudi MD, No Fate, Josh Ayers, Derek Porter, Matthew Green, and Sean Santarud. Thanks to each and every one of you, and we'll see you next time. Peace, peace.